had every intention of starting a little bit earlier. But not everybody's like an old dear like me, you see, gets up early. Never mind, you're forgiven. But I would like to welcome you all and to say thank you for being here to support the children screaming to be heard. I just hope that with the support of our guest speakers and the media and yourselves, that we can bring a voice for the children who have past and present screamed to be heard and still screaming. We have an elderly gentleman here, Sid. Where are you, Sid? Sid's there. You probably know that Sid's been doing the walk for justice.
Come on, Sid, stand up.
He's 70-odd years of age, never been involved with social services or anything like that. But he just has his passion to help the children in care. And so he's started out from Scotland, he's walking through England, he's been over to Ireland, he's got to finish his walk in Wales to come back here, then he's going to Belgium to hand in paperwork for justice for the children. So he's also trying to be a voice in his own little way, which is fantastic, and we need to support him. Do you want to say anything, Sid?
Not very good with words.
Go on, I know that. I've just lived with you for a week. He's terrible. He never says a word. Not literally live with him. Speaking there, Sid.
The reason I started this walk as well is because I wrote to David Cameron about a baby that was stolen from Spain without any legal documents. And all I got was a letter from the Education Department saying that you shouldn't actually believe everything that's in the newspapers, and that they think of the best interest of the child. So I wrote to the Queen and my own MP. Nothing come of it, so I want to take it to the Court of Human Rights and accuse the government of violating children and families' human rights and immunity laws to protect people in power, violate the children that they abuse, traffic and kill. And that has to be abolished. The Court of Human Rights won't abolish immunity, and they are violating those children's human rights too. And something will have to be done about that. But, I'm walking to all the parliaments, and after this I'll be going back to Wales, where I finished from, walking through Wrexham, where child abuse has been called up, to Cardiff, to the Welsh Parliament, and to London again. And I'm walking with a French lady to Brussels who's having their 18-year-old son taken off her, and I want to take that to Court of Human Rights as well. So, anyone that's been abused and it's all been covered up or they're gagged, if they want to go to Brussels with me and demand their human rights to speak and their human rights with justice, compensation and everything, then I'll be happy to take them with me. Because the immunity laws and everything else and gagging laws are all over.
I think what's got to happen is there's been lots of meetings and demos and whatever over the last few years, but we're not really getting anywhere. And I always say that all the doors are shut, and only we can open those doors by coming out en masse. And I get really annoyed because bedroom tax, cuts in benefits. Thousands of people came out and marched against it. So is money more important than our children who are being murdered, prostituted, in care? Can you imagine, and I do a lot of research, because if you're a campaigner, you just don't stand on a corner and shout. You've got to have your evidence, you've got to have your research. And the evidence is with those at ground level, the nation. We speak the truth, and we have to speak for our children. Children, little babies of 6 months in nappies, are being sexually abused. Can you imagine that? 6 months old, having a dick up you? Sorry to sound so, but how else can you say it? And unless people understand what is happening to our children, it will continue as it has continued for centuries. And England has always had a bad name for abusing children, selling children. Mr. Bernardo used to get £15 per child. Does everybody know that? £15 he sold our kids for. Now he gets £170 million turnover every year. That's a lot of money. Hello, Mr. Manning. You're late as always. However, I will say now, moving on, a short time ago, a lady, Albina is her name, she sent me an email with some pictures. I like antique pictures, but I looked at her pictures and I thought, my goodness, this is incredible. Her pictures really speak the truth, really show what is happening, which comes in with my research I've got of the children being abused in the care system. And I thought, God, we're having this conference. I'm sure everybody would love to see these paintings that depict what's happening in the childcare. It's been a very difficult time because she's a very hard lady, but she's here. Come on, Albina, tell why.
Hi, everybody. Now, Maggie asked me to tell you why I was doing these paintings. What possessed me to do this in such volume and what driven me. And one thing she said to me, please don't go about Christ. And Maggie, sorry, I can't, because who was behind me? Who was behind me? Who was pushing me towards this? It's Christ. It's Christ. Because Christ has a love for you, for your children, and Christ died for you. So Christ alone can drive you to this. Listen to me. I haven't lost children to forced adoption. I haven't lost them. My children are in my ex's care. But I have seen with my personal eyes, I've seen the Lord gave me insight. Yes. Insight how the system operates. I've seen how social workers lie, how the courts provide support for the lies and manipulation. Yes. We've seen all that. I've seen with my own eyes. I've personally experienced. And therefore, when I met Lila, I understood she was telling me absolute truth. And once I saw the image of this lady in the film, she was taken away. The baby was taken away from her. She had lost 4 kids and she was disabled. And she couldn't protest. You know, they'd taken 4 children out of her. And I saw that video clip. It tore my heart. And I thought, I can't live with it. I can't live with it. Lord, I can't live with it. Heavenly Father, you gave me this power to speak. You gave me this power to speak through my pictures. Heavenly Father, thank you for this performance right now, that I can speak to people out of my heart, which you poured the love for this cause. Yes. Lord Jesus, I thank you for that, and I just pray that you bless all these people and you return their children to them. Oh Lord Jesus, I beg you, Lord Jesus, come in all your mighty power, come. Heavenly Father, you ask me, why I asked for a minister a gown. Because my pictures are spiritual. My pictures are not of this world. The pictures are inspired by God Himself. My pictures are inspired by Christ Himself. And therefore I have no shame. I have no shame to proclaim Christ in that. I know people are of different walks and everything. But look at my picture, Madonna of our light. Madonna of our time. Look at it. She has no body but God alone. She has no body but God alone. A light comes upon her. And the dark forces around her, like clouds. And she has nobody to appeal to but God alone. We are in a spiritual battle. We should understand it. This is not just Maria, sorry, I disagree with you. Say, we can do. No, we cannot unless we involve God in it. Because Christ alone conquered devil, Satan on the cross. Nobody else. God, Christ alone has a Father's heart for us. No other religion offers this Father-Son relationship. No other religion offers you Father-Son relationship. Only Father, God the Father. I can tell you why I'm sure that God involved Christ into this business. I can tell you why. Because when you see, at the age of 50, I became a student in the college. And then I went to university, 3 years at university as well. So in my project, I thought, I'm going to paint Jesus. That was my idea. Jesus is my life, it's my identity. So I wanted to paint Jesus. And you know what happened? Jesus said, no, paint Madonna of our time. Because He's got heart for you. He's got a heart for you. Yes. He wants you to know He loves you and loves your children. And why it is so important, parental love. People say to me, oh, foster parents can do the same job as a parent. No, no, because only it's the way how God set up. God set up parents. It's God's way. Parents responsible for their children. Parents can give them identity and security. A child who is brought up in the best of foster parents still have a hole in his heart and wondering, where's my mommy and where's my daddy? This is why the parents, and we should ask the government to invest into the families. Right now, the satanic government destroying the families, destroying family values. They're re-engineering the whole society. They're doing to the society great damage because the children grow without identity, without security. They don't know anything about their roots. And the Satan does it. You know why God such sympathy for us? It's because it's the same cause. Because Satan alienated us, humankind, from the fatherhood of God. And the same Satan does to you now. It's his final blow. He destroyed Christianity, which he tries to destroy, you know. Don't look for Christianity per se. Don't look for churches. Don't look at them. Look for relationship with Christ. And then you'll see the transformation. I've seen miracles happening to me. Happening. And my son returned to me 2 months ago. So I'm waiting for another miracle for my daughter to come back. So I've seen other miracles. I've seen strange miracles. My leg was healed. I've seen the sky cut in half for me. I've seen the rose being resurrected. And I've seen all sorts of things. I believe what I'm saying. I know what I believe because it's on personal experience, not just theoretical knowledge. Yes? The social services and family courts, I portray them as mallet heads because they don't think what they're doing. They're only tools in the hands of the system. They don't know what they're doing. They don't see what they're doing. And if they see, they shut up. Their mouth is shut. They don't want to tell you, don't want to reveal to the public. They're weak, they're damaged. They themselves need a prayer for. Because look at them, they're only human beings as well, like us. And why they're doing inhumane things? It's satanic what they're doing. Yes. It's absolutely satanic. And we need to pray for the release of these people. They are in bondage to Satan. They are just as victims as your children. I know it sounds horrible to some people because I hate social service. As an organization, I hate them as well. But as persons, we cannot hate a person. We need to save that person from their errors, from their sins. And all we can do is pray. Until I started praying for my ex-husband, my son didn't return. I went through courts for 4 years, fighting and fighting and fighting. And the Lord gave me the power through that. Maggie came here to remind me. Okay.
Yep.
Yes, my time's up.
Now.
Yep. Okay.
Thanks, Albina. I am being asked about the agenda and the speakers for today. And I wrongly presume that everybody would just, you know, when you book your seats or your tickets, whatever, you would print off who's speaking and everything, but there's a few people who haven't. So that was Albina. We've now got, next one is Rosie, who's a voice for the children. Then we've got Michael by Skype from Australia, who wrote the song. for the children screaming to be heard. I'll tell you all about that when we come there. Then we've got the Emperor Roscoe. Then we've got Laura Leon, this lady here. Then we've got the Tim Spearman, who has written the Lebensborn programme, Children Screaming to be Heard. You've got John Hemming at, I think it's 11 o'clock. And after John Hemming, we have Sue Reed from the Daily Mail. And Sue Reed is speaking on behalf of ladies, or men or women, whose children have been left with the partners who are the paedophiles, because no one's really taking any notice of children left with partners, you know, whatever. Then we have Sonya Poulton, who's the voice for the people. She's also a journalist, and her TV company is here today. Then you're going to have lunch. Then we've got Dr. Dennehy, a child psychiatrist. She works in the system. She'll tell you what she's going to tell you anyway. Then we have Ian Joseph. You all know Ian Joseph, forced adoptions. He's arriving personally from Monaco. And then the last speaker is Michael Bailey, who's a very well-known barrister who wins a lot of cases, but unfortunately he cannot win all cases. So that's your agenda for the day. So if you want to ask me again, do. It's all right. Or ask Mr. Manning, he's got a good memory sometimes.
Well,
but now...
I did request 10 minutes.
So did everybody else. But I can't let one person speak and not the other people. It wouldn't be fair, because everybody's got a story. And we're not here for stories. We're here to try to help each other and to get something positive, as opposed to families talking about their own case. For the lady who's just come back in, I've just given the agenda what it is, but you've got it there, have you now? All right, okay. Morning, Jason, or good afternoon, whichever. Jason's our technician. Now, we have Rosie, a young lady. She was denied the right to her father, but Rosie remained one of the silent witnesses. Well, no longer, because Rosie is becoming the voice for the children, screaming to be heard. I'll let Rosie speak to you now, and you'll find her very interesting. She looks like 18, but she's not. She's a lot younger. She's lovely.
My parents separated in 2000 when I was 2 years old, and for the next 9 years I struggled through the heart-wrenching family court battles my parents would give to defeat each other in, whilst I was ripped apart between them. The contact order allocated me 4 days a month to see my dad. This was no relationship. He knew nothing of my friends or school life, and I knew nothing of my absent family. He was my dad. Could he not just pop round and ask me how my day was? No, it was not his time. When I was at my mum's, it was like I wasn't his daughter anymore, because he wasn't allowed to be my dad. It was all on paper, in writing, in court orders, my life being controlled like some kind of computer game. At my dad's when I was young, I couldn't sleep without holding his thumb. I was scared that people were going to come in the night and take me away. This must link back to the vague memory of when police visited us whilst my mum was on holiday in America. They told my dad that I was on the missing persons list and needed to be taken away. When he refused, they insisted to get me out of the bath and check me for bruises or any signs of abuse. They were treating him like he was some kind of criminal. They did leave, but my mum's solicitor later said that the police should have forcibly removed me from our house. I loved him so much, and I couldn't make sense of it all. I knew he wasn't bad, or was there something wrong with the way I felt? I was so confused, but I couldn't talk about it. Everyone was against my dad, everyone but me. I remember talking about him once at my mum's and her crying and crying. I didn't want to upset her, so I tried never to speak of him. I became really lonely, and I felt I had to be careful about everything I said in case it was used to hurt either of my parents in court. I was used to hurt them, to break my own family, and the court stood oblivious of my feelings. My mum had the police drive us to Dad's every time because she needed protection from my dangerous father. However, before this, my uncle used to drive me between houses to help out. One day, my uncle came to collect me from my dad's. I'd worry that every goodbye could be the last for a while, and I couldn't face that anymore. I hated missing my dad. It all hurt too much, and I couldn't see why I couldn't just stay. I can see it now. My dad and I stood on the pavement outside our house. I won't accept that I have to go, and I start crying and crying in his arms. I know he doesn't want me to go either. I'm clinging to him, but my uncle's trying to pull me away. I was screaming and crying in our street, but eventually my hand left my dad's as I was put into the car. As my uncle drives down our road, I took off my seatbelt and clambered onto the back seats, banging on the car windows and crying for my dad through my tears as I watched him disappear as we turned the corner. As my uncle drives down our road, I took off my seatbelt again, kept banging and banging on the car windows, crying my heart out. That stupid court order. My mum had to meet us halfway because my uncle couldn't calm me down. For years, even now sometimes, that memory visits me, forcing me to feel that desperate, that heartache, and that helpless all over again. A lot had changed. My dad met many people in the same situation as him, caught in an unjust system that's denying their parents their own children for no good reason. He realised that the inequality of the family court was a massive problem all across the UK and further. He began campaigning on a huge scale to bring light of the secret family court to the public. I remember thinking how funny my dad was climbing buildings. I must have been really small, but I was proud of him. I encouraged him to wear his Robin suit because I thought the R stood for Rosie, and every time there was a protest or march, I loved the excitement and wanted to go. At primary school, there were awards which were celebrated in school assembly where your parents could come and see you. For me, this had to be done over 2 assemblies, so my mum could come separately to my dad, and I found this really embarrassing. However, in school, I felt I could talk about my dad. Every other Friday, I was due to see him that weekend, and I called it Daddy Day at school. I'd get so excited, and all my classmates would get excited with me. The damage of the family court was clear. I hardly saw any family on my dad's side because there was simply not the time. It was not fair or right that I missed out on the relationships with my cousins, grandparents, aunts and uncles. None of it was right. At Dad's, our door had always been open and kids from all the streets would come over and play with me. But things changed. Soon our door was always locked, our curtains out the front were always closed, and any knock at the door sent our house to silence. Police, bailiffs, they were constantly out to get my dad. And why? Because he was fighting their corrupt system, because he would not let them separate us, because he loved his daughter. When I was at my mum's once, the police raided our house at Dad's. They took the computer, pictures and poems I drew for him, and protest costumes he wore. They had no right to take what I had done for my dad. I couldn't believe they could just invade our lives like that. And why? Were they scared? My dad was determined. My dad was not giving up. He was not scared of being arrested, going to prison, or telling the whole world what heartbreak we were suffering. They picked on the wrong man. The Children and Family Court Advisory and Support Service is a government organisation that is meant to advise the court by talking to the family and children. During my childhood, I had quite a few meetings with them. At age 5, they asked me my views. I told them I wanted to see my dad half the time, but my opinion was wrong in their eyes. They rejected me by saying that I was too young to know what I wanted. Yet I know if I'd have asked to stay with my mum that day, that it would have been used in court. In another meeting, when I was a little older, about 8 years old, I spoke to 2 Plymouth gas officers. Again, I told them I wanted to see more of my dad, and he replied, "But how would this make your mum feel?" I should not have been asked anything to do with my mother's feelings. It was about how I felt, not her. But I replied honestly and said that I expected it would upset her. And he replied, "And how do you feel about upsetting your mum?" By this point, I did not know what to say. No child wants to hurt their parents, but this was not about that. It was about what was right, how I should have been brought up. From the beginning, it should have been equally with both parents. It made me feel bad for feeling the way I felt. There were two sides, and I just wanted to be on both. I finished speaking to them and sat out in the waiting area whilst my mum spoke to them. From where I was, I could hear her crying, and I thought they must have told her what I'd said. I felt really guilty. That day, they tried to trick me into saying that I wanted to spend the time with my mum, but they didn't even need me to say it. They twisted my words and lied in court, saying that I didn't want to see more of my dad. In 2006, after my dad and I were allowed 10 minutes to talk to each other over the phone between 5:30 and 6 on a Wednesday evening, it came up in court that he sent too many kisses on text to me, that he was obsessive and wanted to see me too much. Just to make life harder, the CSA took my dad's driving licence away, making it difficult to get to school, visit friends and family, and confined us to the house. My mum's parents had to pick me up from dad and take me to school, and this was uncomfortable for me, as even talking of my dad's name caused awkwardness. One day I got upset when my grandparents came. I didn't want to go with them. I was just so sick of all the problems, the overcomplications and the hate. Before long, the police were on the phone to my dad, wondering why I was not at school yet. And this annoyed me. They were always on his case. So I told my dad I wanted to go and speak to the police. I was determined to tell them what was going on, and I believed that they could help. How many times have I trusted people I should be able to trust, just to have it thrown back in my face?
They're a bit deaf at the back.
In the police station, I completely emptied out my feelings to a police officer, where everything I said, she managed to twist around. You only want to see more of your dad because you have lots of fun weekends with him. I felt so small, humiliated, and completely knocked back, and eventually I burst into tears in the police station. Why won't anyone just listen to me? I cried at her. She reassured me she'd get me a counsellor who I could talk to, but she never did this. Instead, she broke my confidence even more by going back and telling my mum everything I had said that day. These authorities, who are meant to be professionals, taught me to trust no one. The lies they made up made life that so much harder on top of having separate parents. That alone is difficult. But no, they obviously felt I deserved more punishment. For what again? What did I do wrong? Why did the family courts turn everything into such a war? They sent my parents into a courtroom, basically to rip each other to pieces, to choose the best parent. I was caught in the middle every time, and I hated this. I felt like I had to choose the side to be on, but I needed both of my parents, like every child does, and people broke my heart denying me that. Quite often, I just wanted to die. As much as I loved my brothers, my mum, and my dad, I felt like I was the one hurting them, and if I wasn't there anymore, they'd have no reason to go to court. I couldn't see any other way out. I wanted to be with my dad. I needed to be. It wasn't a feeling I could control. He was my dad. What was so wrong with that? In 2008, he got sent to prison for campaigning with Fathers for Justice, for loving me, his own daughter. His involvement with Fathers for Justice caused him to do extreme things, but you've got to understand that they are in extreme circumstances, and in the hell of the family courts, you are not heard unless you make it impossible to be ignored. Did they really think sending him to prison would make him give up fighting for me? This is clearly what they wanted. He was just a father desperate to see his daughter, not the criminal he was labelled as. But this is the sacrifice my dad had to make, and I'm so proud of him for doing this for me. If he hadn't, I doubt we'd be together now. I remember being told the news. I was at my mum's and I cried and cried. How could those sick, twisted people possibly have the reason to lock my dad away? All my life I'd been invisible through their paychecks and business cards, and now it'd come to this. My dad in prison. I spent the rest of my evening on our sofa crying in a very awkward situation, as I hardly even spoke to my dad, so it was a big thing to be crying in front of my mum over him. I have two older brothers, and we all have different dads. I never spoke to them about it because they were in my mum's side of my life, so my dad wasn't. They both came home from work to find me crying on the sofa. After finding out why, my older brother swore a couple of times, marched into the kitchen and slammed the door. My younger brother came home, gave me a hug, said nothing, and went to his room. Because of our childhood complications, I knew it was awkward, and I could understand that it was difficult for my brothers to comfort me in the situation, but it really opened my eyes to how divided my family was. I knew we all loved each other very much, but our relationship was complicated. Whilst in prison, my dad missed my 10th birthday, my piano exam, and our weekends together. This broke me that little bit more, stole another bit of hope that this could all just be over. I couldn't believe it was happening, still. How dare they deny me my father? How dare they not listen to me when they all say they work in the child's best interests? Months later, after my dad was out of prison and more court hearings were going on, another CAFCAS officer came down from London to look into my family. I stressed for ages over my room at my dad's. I was so worried how he would judge it. I just wanted it to be perfect, so he could find no reason to separate us anymore. I tidied a shelf with pencils, books and teddies, all neat, ordered and straight. I'd stare at it and then worry that he would think I was trying too hard and that it was all too neat, so that I wasn't comfortable at our house. I knew their tricks, and as a child I should not have had the stress of this. I knew they all had ulterior motives behind their kind words and sympathetic smiles. Suddenly I'd panic and mess it up and try and make it look more natural. That stupid shelf niggled away at me for days. I was so nervous when he came. Just that mere hour or so would mean so much. He would decide what was to be done with my life, again, my life, in the hands of some alien person. We also had an interview at school where I made sure I made my feelings extremely clear. If he didn't listen, I'd run away. I couldn't take it anymore. At age 5, they ignored me. But now, age 10, I would show him that I was not a child to be manipulated into their controlling, unjust and damaging games. I had a dad, and I deserved to be with him. The first time I would force them to listen. However, it should not have taken this. I should not have needed to threaten to run away to get a voice. In the following months, days at court began to have positive outcomes. Things were finally changing, and slowly it finished. In the summer of 2009, I was granted shared care and shared residency with my dad. It was amazing. I couldn't believe it was all over. It was how it should have been from the very start. But 9 years. It took 9 years to win back my dad. They've robbed 9 years of my life. After, my parents seemed to get on almost as if nothing had happened, which confirmed how much of a set-up the whole thing had been. The lies and other excuses had only been as a kind of ammunition to defeat my dad, make him look bad, not fit to be my parent. It was what my mum's solicitors told her to do. My parents were encouraged to make cases against each other. The courts made the fight. What a waste of time. What unnecessary pain. At home, my dad has about 3 suitcases of paperwork. Was that in the interest of me, or were people just making money out of me? 9 years of precious time I will never get back with my dad. Government has lost its humanity. Everything is about money and power, and they'll abuse our human rights until they have this.
Yep.
Abusers like CAFCAS, who say they work in the child's best interests, yet have no evidence to support this claim. Ofsted reports have repeatedly found the service to be inadequate. And agencies such as the CSA, who's meant to financially support children, had no concern for me when they took my dad's driving licence away. This is even people such as the police, who left me hurt and ignored like everyone else. Their aims are united. Government services are breaking families in order to destroy society, to gain control and build the economy. Family breakdown costs the taxpayer £44 billion every year. Dividing families results in 2 cars, 2 houses, 2 sets of bills. The government does this because happy families make no money for them. Imagine the mass money made from the grueling process of the family court. The counsellors, social workers, barristers, solicitors, all fueling the cycle to weaken the people, creating high demand for such professions. Did you know that 1 in 3 children is without their father? Laws have been continually made to remove fathers legally, emotionally and biologically. we're left with a generation of fatherless families. After separation, 93% of the time, children are made to live with their mother by reason of gender. Domestic abuse is a major weapon used. In my case, my dad buying the bigger packet of cornflakes rather than the smaller, more expensive one my mum wanted was used against him as abuse. Petty, insignificant things like this separate good, loving fathers from their families every day. If a mother turns up to court crying, she has been emotionally abused. Alternatively, if a father brings proof of depression in counselling reports and doctor's notes, his plea is twisted as a weakness and is deemed unable to cope. I cannot emphasise enough how biased our so-called justice system is.
Yes.
Family courts are corrupt. They're filling our societies with a generation damaged and hurt, unveiling crime and chaos onto our streets. Prisons are swelling with young offenders, 70% of which come from low-parent families. Fathers develop children's confidence, self-esteem and self-control. Without this, how do you expect them to behave? Fatherless boys are twice as likely to be excluded from school, and girls 2.5 times more likely to become pregnant as teenagers. And government pushes 200 children a day through court battles where they are torn between their parents, just like I was. I would cry myself to sleep, sometimes even unaware of why I was feeling so broken. There is so much I can't remember as a child which I blocked out, but the feelings and the emotions stay. I was told that I was important, yet nobody listened to me. I was told that my feelings mattered, yet my screaming voice was silent. I loved my dad and wanted to be with him, yet I was treated as though I did not deserve a father. Their lies have gutted me. I've written letters asking those responsible why they broke my family, to Kafkas, CSA, and to Judge David Tyzak, but nobody cares. I've even been threatened with harassment by my own police service for writing to the judge, and even after all the trouble he caused my family. Even the NSPCC is protecting the corrupt government that is abusing so many children. So this is why I started Children's for Justice, and is why I'm not giving up. I want to end the abuse on children in the family courts. I've decided to use my experience, fight back, and give children the voice I never had. Thank you.
Thanks, Rosie. What I want to say to all, there are some very good foster carers. There are some very bad ones as well, which is the known fact. Social workers, I know we have social workers with us. There are some good social workers and CAPCAS officers, as there are bad as well. Sadly, the bad social workers are giving the good ones a bad name, and everybody sort of saying, oh, yes, social workers, you know. But moving on from Rosie's speech, bless her. Thanks, Jolly, for letting her come, your lovely daughter. On the table here, we have a stone. I don't know if anyone's looked at it. It weighs about 2 stones, actually. 2 stones, I can't say in pounds or whatever. A little boy, aged 10, was told by the social worker he was going to be removed. And somehow or the other, this little boy got these 4 stones and he put them under the wheels of his nan to stop her driving him away to be taken into care. The grandmother at the time, when the case was being heard, took the stone to court, and the judge refused to accept it as evidence of a child screaming to be heard. And so the kid went into care and was badly beaten up, and that is the evidence, that stone, of most of our children, a lot of our children in care who don't want to be there. But then again, you know, and I will apologise to social workers and the likes, and I will say that I have been undercover and I have got information of the money being made by the agencies. There's a multi-billion-pound industry our children have become, I'm afraid. And what we need is for our social workers to start to work with us families so we can all fight back and get rid of these closed family courts as well. Mr. Mumby, Sir Mumby, might be a nice old boy, but he's only a front. He's not going to stop what's going on. They'll never open those family courts because of the money that's being made, I'm afraid. So if that doesn't happen, then it's up to all the families to get out there to march in the thousands and the thousands. There's a bloody war on, you'd all pick your guns up and march, wouldn't you? For what? A corrupt country? The kids we need to march for. However, the next speaker should have been Michael from Australia, but I don't think he's coming on, is he?
Yeah, less than 5 minutes will happen.
Less than 5? They don't want to listen to me for 5 minutes, do you? Oh,
Can I just give an answer?
No, Albina, no, sorry. What about the question and answers for 5 minutes? How about that? Sorry, but Jason was a little bit late coming in, it's not my fault. Questions and answers. Who's got a question? You know all the answers, that's what it is. Sorry, yes. Yes. What is your question? Yeah. Yeah.
It's just that you, in your opening speech, you were saying that sometimes children are abused, and you're talking about paedophilia. And it seems to me that you're kind of suggesting that maybe, although you all said that foster parents are good, and in fact I've experienced that. We've had Rosie talking about her father, how her father was stopped. There was no mention of paedophilia with Rosie's talk. But my concern is that what you seem to be saying that there's all this paedophilia going on. And I think that's kind of confusing things because it's the social workers who believe that there's so much paedophilia that keep taking children away, very often on those grounds, or not even kind of insinuating it without actually accusing you directly. And that's my worry about this particular kind of organisation that you set up, is that you seem to be saying that there's all this paedophilia going on.
No, I do not. No, sorry. No, sorry, you're wrong. No, you're wrong. I do not continually talk about paedophiles, but there are paedophiles out there. Have you not read in the press that the media have recently been saying that England is the hub of the paedophiles? It's all in the press. I didn't say it. And if you work in the system, I run the helpline for the charity, and I hear what's going on from that end of the country to this end of the country. And somebody could tell me something up there, and I think, oh, yeah, all right, okay. Then you hear the same sort of thing from down there, from somewhere else. And you start to collate your evidence. And this is what I said at the very beginning. The evidence, the truth is with the nation. There's a little girl there who's just spoken. The truth is with the nation.
Yes, but she wasn't abused by paedophiles.
But the children in care cannot speak about being abused because they're not on contact. They're told what to say and not what to say. You have to know how the system works and how the children are not allowed to speak out. And I can only speak on behalf of all the families who contact me. I must have over 100 emails a day from families throughout this country.
But the abuse is taking them from their parents and making up lies about their parents. That's the abuse, isn't it? Okay, maybe some of them, but a very small number of them might be abused in foster homes. But it's the abuse.
No, it's bigger than you think. It's bigger than you think. Sorry. It is bigger. It is, honestly. This is why I said I'm not putting down foster or social workers, because there's good and bad in every walk of life, as they say. But look, the social workers have got to listen to the children. Rosie said the same, nobody listened. Why can't the children, under the Gillick competence rule, you know what the Gillick competence rule is? Do you?
Sorry.
Do you know what the Gillick competence rule is?
Yes, I think I do, yeah.
What is it?
It's about children being able to talk, well, it's about not allowing the age at which a child...
It's for children to actually go into a court and speak and say what they want. They are denied that right. Children have no voices and they are screaming. Look at that little boy. I would not have come back out of I was in retirement, but what I witnessed to a child, I thought this can't be happening in England. And I was thinking like the world thought, well, children in England are safe. This can't happen to children. My God, it does, believe me, it does.
Mine's not a question, but it's in response to the lady. If you want to talk about abuse, yes, the abuse is children being taken into care in the first place, but it doesn't stop there. The abuse continues in care, and I'm not just talking foster carers. Yes, there are some good foster carers, but in children's homes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yesterday on the news, they have opened up a new case in Nottingham of abuse in their children's homes.
Beechwood and Woodnook.
Yeah, exactly. Just
And
yesterday,
I've
that
known
was
people
on
who've
the
been in
news.
both places.
I know children that have been in care homes where the staff have sent them out with shopping lists to steal. Where they've been passed around, girls get passed around all the boys that are in that particular home. This is not stories, this happens. I had a friend that had a girlfriend when we were teens who was in care. She ended up dead because she was sent out to prostitute. These things happen.
I've been on the streets of London in the early hours of the morning filming and talking to the homeless people. And this is where, again, the truth lies. They're all from the care system. You've got 49% in prisons from the care system. You've got thousands in detention centres from the care system. We've got thousands in psychiatric units from the care system. So what is going wrong? Let me tell you something. Over 2 years ago, a young man from Scotland, he was so sexually abused, he was left with HIV, as a lot of the boys from the Islington care homes were also left with HIV. What happened? This young man from Scotland told me a lot of things that was going on, but he also told me of where all the bodies were of the children who were murdered in the care homes up in Scotland. But that young man, he was too afraid to speak out, which a lot of them are afraid when you've been in care. A few months ago, another gentleman, and he said I can name him. His name is Peter Kelby. Peter Kelby is an actor in Coronation Street, EastEnders, things like that. Peter's sister, Alexina Kelby, was actually murdered in the care system. And I won't go through all what he said, but however, what Peter told me, I have all the evidence of where those thousands of children from the Scottish care homes are buried. From the care homes, murdered and buried. Teenage girls made pregnant and those babies buried. I have that evidence. So again, your evidence is there with the nation. So here we have 2 years apart. One guy's too afraid to tell you where all the bodies are, and another one now, Peter Kelby, remember that name, he's a famous actor. He knows where they are. His mother was murdered as well because she was one of the first speakers to speak out wanting her children back. So
And it's not just historic either, it still goes on today. All the cases in the news are historical ones, but it still goes on today. And the rule of thumb with social services is, if a child is with its parents, it tells the gospel truth. If that child is moved to either foster care or in a care home, they're a liar.
that lady, she's Sister Sue. Sister Sue, she runs a big organisation and a radio station.
Can you give us an update about the Gloria Musa case, the African family who had their children be taken away from them, and subsequently the lady in hospital, the child was put in care, and there's a lot of controversy why this happened, they're Nigerian, and the Nigerian government had it in the regime as a sovereign, but 6 of the children were taken away from her and adopted out.
Gloria's still in prison.
Have you got any updates on what happened to
No.
that case?
No, only that we can now name what's going on. But there's 7 children taken into care. I met Gloria and her husband. She's a priestess, a lovely lady.
Including the baby, yeah?
7 children taken into care.
And the husband and wife are now in prison.
I think Gloria's in Holloway, isn't she?
Yeah. Oh, she might have been. On another note, we have now, talking about Moosas, we have Brian P, who is now in prison because Brian has, and Sonya Poulton has all the evidence now. She's not here. Brian P was the guy who blew up the child paedophiles and the whatever it was in Lambeth Council.
Oh, yes.
In Lambeth Council. And he wrote the books, of which the government took all the books off of the shelves throughout the country. And he's been in and out of prison, and all as he's tried to do, oh, you got it. There, the lady's got the book. He's in prison yet again because he's been shut up, because I can only tell you as it is that he has the evidence on Mr. Blair, yeah, and others. So he's been locked away at the moment, Sister
Not
Sue.
forgetting Jimmy Savile, of course.
No, Jimmy Savile.
Can't
yeah,
forget
yeah.
Jimmy Savile.
Maggie,
Yes.
as you know, my little boy's written a little bit of what he's going through at the moment. He's 12. He's been refused the right to a solicitor. They keep saying that they'll go out and see.
Well, when Michael Bailey's here this afternoon, or Claire, then speak to them and ask them. That's your best bet. Brian. Paul,
Yeah,
Paul Manning, Fathers for Justice.
No, I'm not Fathers for Justice. Forgive me, I used to be Fathers for Justice, but I've enlarged my scope and I represent all children. I've got nothing to do with Fathers for Justice. Don't anybody think I used to be a member of Fathers for Justice, but I wouldn't recommend anybody to be a member of that particular organisation. I would probably go for another Fathers organisation, but not the Matt O'Connor crowd. I wear a coat that says Fathers for Justice, but that was made when I was a member. But wherever I go, this coat comes with me because it's got my son's picture on it, and I love my son. I just wanted to say, if I may, that many here may think that Rosie Stansby was put up to what she said. Maybe her father pressurised her to say what she said. I know Rosie's story quite well, and everything she said is totally true, and she wasn't put up to what she said. So any journalists here must ask the question, why do we have one child who's screaming out to see her father, or it could be the mother in that case? What is wrong with the justice system that ignores a child? And what I can't understand is the journalists of our country seem to ignore that, well, they may think there's no smoke without fire. But Rosie is one example of thousands of examples of children who want to see their fathers and their mothers. And also, what I can't understand in conclusion is that Jolly, her father, is one of the kindest, and I'm not flattering him, is one of the gentlest, kindest, unassuming men I've ever met. And therefore I can't understand why the court system prevented her from seeing him. He's not a big head, he's not a drunkard, he's not a drug addict. He's just an everyday good father. So why is it there's something wrong with our court system that stops children from seeing their mum and dad?
We're now going to listen to Laura Leon. Laura Leon is a very well-known sculptress. Nearly 2 years ago, I wrote to Cameron and to the BBC, and I said, for all our children who are dead, murdered, trafficked, abused in care, there's not one monument as a memorial, so we could remember all these children. Mr. Cameron has never replied, but then if he did, then it would be admitting guilt that the care system is a failure. BBC wrote back and said, no, we do not support a monument, but we support fostering and adoptions. Well, we know why, don't we? Would you like me to tell you why? Coming back to the paedophiles?
Yeah.
Excuse me, but I am an adopted mother. My adopted daughter had her children taken away from her. And what upsets me is that it sounds as though you think that all foster parents and adopted...
No, I already said there's good ones. My grandson's got a lovely foster lady. Unfortunately, the first one beat him up like mad. So there's good and bad. So please don't get it wrong, you know. We all agree with that, don't we? There's good and bad. But anyway, coming back to Laura. Laura has designed this beautiful sculpture that we, you know, but we just can't do anything. I'll leave Laura to tell you about it. Laura Leon.
Just waiting for the... No, it's not.
You want to start?
No, it's not that.
I know, we've got the other stuff.
Sorry. Hello, everybody.
Shout up, Laura.
Can you hear me? Okay.
You have to pretend you're Maggie and speak like I do.
Yeah. Okay. Maggie rang me about a year ago, out of the blue, asking me if I'd be interested in coming up with an idea for a children's monument for her charity and for all the children abused in the system. And she went on and told me about what she's doing and everything, and I thought, wow, you know, this sounds really passionate woman who's on a mission. And her mission is a good one. It's to reveal children that still are protected by us adults in this day and age. So I was quite moved. So I thought, right, she had some ideas, and I said, well, leave it with me while I try to come up with an idea, a concept that would be fitting for such a worthy cause. So, it's not up yet. Anyway, never mind. I've got leaflets here. So I thought about it a lot and came up with the idea of the building blocks of what children need. No, well, that's one of them. That's the Child of Hope. It's the this one I want, Jason. So I came up with this idea, this concept of what children need, the building blocks of what children need to feel safe in the world. So I've got these concrete blocks. I wanted something positive and hopeful, because we know the horrors that go on in our society. We know that. We accept that. We want to change that. So on these blocks, there'll be about 2 foot squares piled up, which, okay, if you can see.
There we are.
Yeah, that's it. Well, that's some of it. And each block would have a word scrolled on it by a child, and the words can be all kinds of words like care, protect, trust. Now, trust, think about trust. Every child wants to trust their parents, their carers, their teachers. And when that trust is broken, what happens? Children shut down, and they live in their own fantasy world of frustration. And trust is so important for children, to find someone. Like Rosie said, she couldn't find anyone to listen to her, to trust her. So one of the other words is listen. The one thing I've learned in life is the one thing that children need is their feelings acknowledged. That's it. And adults tend to control, tell children what to think and do, but they don't listen to what the children's trying to tell them. Children speak from truth. They don't lie. Feelings are truth, even as adults. If you go by your feelings, that's truth. Forget about all this thinking and analysing. Your feelings matter. Everybody's feelings, especially children. And unless children are honoured, respected, that's another word, respect. Years ago in the 70s, I was teaching in Felton Borstal to young offenders, teaching them art. And I was quite young, I was only in my 20s, but I knew one thing intuitively. Children need respect. Do not talk down to them. Talk equal. They are equal to us. Children are not inferior. They have wisdom beyond even us. So I had a whole class of young offenders, and they were just come from the most horrific background you can imagine. But we got on really well. Yeah, they tried it on. They're sneaky, but they were great because I just talked to them equally. I respected them. And what's the next thing I'm going to say? So those are the important words that I feel will go on those concrete blocks. Thank you, Jason. Got it at the end. And now this would be quite a high monument, probably about 10 foot, yeah? And the bronze children on it would be life-sized, maybe 3 boys, 3 girls, haven't decided. That's a prototype. So it doesn't exist really, it's just graphic picture. So that's the idea anyway. And the child of hope, as I said, I wanted something positive, something about hope, because we don't live in a perfect world. But what we can do is small things that are perfect to make changes. Everybody doing a little bit in the world. And this is what I do. I do art, and I try to do it for good causes. And thanks to Maggie, I've had this opportunity. Now, the Child of Hope is the first one screened up. Jason, please screen up the Child of Hope, please. And I must also explain that the 3 bronzes on the second page were a private commission from a man who rang me up and asked me to do these sculptures as he adopted a child who was abused, and he looked after this child, and she had a journey of anorexia, and he wanted me to do 3 sculptures, and we named them Child of History, Child of Hope, and Child of Peace. This was her journey, her inner journey of healing to get to what is now a success story of an accomplished musician. And the Child of Hope I've used as an example for Maggie's charity. And I made a little maquette here. Now this maquette is a miniature version of that one. And it's for sale. So we're going to hope to sell some. So if you're feeling inclined, please take an order and order one. Now this little one is made from bronze resin. Now for all of you that don't know what bronze resin is, it's a mix of bronze powder in the resin to give an imitation bronze. Still got the metal in it, but it's a cheaper version. So the bronze is pricey. The bronze will be about, I think it was £680, but this is £85, so it's more affordable. But what I've got on each one is my signature, but also a number. And I hope we can sell, I know it's a tall order, but I'm hoping we'll sell 2014. And every number that's bought will have a number on it. So it'll be 1, 2, up to 2014. And every year will represent all the children that should have been protected in our society. Centuries, years of abuse. And it's 2014. Hello, when are we going to get it? So I'm hoping to mark 2014, and all the money, the proceeds of the sales, will go towards the monument and Maggie's safe houses, so the children have a chance to be safe in the world for once. And that's it really, that's all I have to say. I don't know if anybody's got, we haven't got time for
I
questions.
just want to add something that since we're talking about the sales, I've got my exhibitions next door here across the corridor, and I've got prints to sale as well. I just forgot to mention because my speech was curtailed. So I've got a couple of prints and smaller prints for one. I put price as low as I can because I was working 1 year on that exhibition, and I put a lot of expenses for rental and transporting. So please come and help me to recover the costs. Okay.
Thank you. And I just want to say thank you to Maggie for allowing me and to have this chat and to commission me to do this project. And I hope it comes off the ground. Thank you so much. And there's orders.
For 3 years, I've been trying to put on a Live Aid concert so that the world could be made aware of what's happening to our children in the UK, because the world thinks they're all safe. So I contacted, I'll tell you who I contacted, Michael Bublé, because I thought Michael Bublé would make a lovely father figure for the kids in care. No go. Nobody didn't want to know. So then I contacted the agent for, who was the other one? Bob Geldof, who did the Live Aid for the African children. Bob Geldof is not interested in the English kids. Now please, there's no disrespects here for African or Indian children, whatever, because I've worked around the world with children. In many parts of the world, I really have. I've seen the song. So that I say this with no disrespect. The British celebrities will raise funds for all the big charities, and they'll sing for the African and Indian children. I agree with all of that.
Sorry, those charities may also be corrupt, how you see the government as well, and all those things may not always go to those African children.
No, they don't. That's right.
From our African brothers and sisters.
That's right, I agree.
I'd like to say that in terms of the celebrities making money for African children, they're making money for themselves, and that's the reality.
But the point I'm trying to say is that they will not come forward to help do a concert so we can have a safe house for our children. There is not one safe house in England, Scotland or Wales for the kids running away from care. You go to the London streets in the early hours of the morning. I have seen a 4 or 5 years of age she was, blonde, big, thick red lipstick, bright red lipstick, 2 o'clock in the morning. And I know where she was going. I should have been in Soho Square yesterday to do the documentary, to give all the evidence and whatever I picked up on those nights out on the streets of London. Little girl, do you know what they do? They take the kids from the care system, little kids, and they drug them up and strip them naked and sexually abuse them all night long. Don't no one dare tell me it doesn't happen, because it does! It does! I've seen it! And you know who the paedophiles, now I come to the paedophiles. Westminster. A lot of them celebrities. I'm ex-show business, but I would not go into the recording business as a young woman because of the, it's called the casting couch. So a lot of celebrities would perhaps, you know, be straight when they went into the business, but down the line, whew, they go the other way. And I didn't go into that. So I know that a lot of celebrities, and from Westminster, they go to 2 places that I'm not going to say now, because they'll be told later. So yeah, kids are taken and abused all night long, stripped. terrible. And people won't recognise this. But however, nobody was interested in helping our children. Safe house, you know, poor little kids got nowhere to run to. And then out of the blue, this guy called Michael in Australia contacted me. He's a singer, songwriter and whatever. He actually was concerned. He's in Australia and he's concerned for our kids here, so he wrote a song. Because I said to him, Michael, when kids go into care, there's no contact as such. You might get an hour's contact in a room somewhere, you know, it's all supervisor sat there writing everything down, and that's your contact. But there's no telephones or no computers, or well, computers I agree because of what's going on there. But, so Michael wrote this song, Calling Me, Calling You. I shall now let Michael tell you himself. He's speaking to you from Australia, if you don't mind. Okay?
Thank you, Maggie, the opportunity of express my feelings about what's actually going on in the UK. I was born in the UK, I was born in St. Helens, and you know, I think what's going on over there is absolutely disgusting. I've wrote a song for the Australian Stolen Generation Aboriginals as well, and you know, I was very grateful to meet Maggie and to do a song for the UK kids, because I know what it was like when I was growing up. And you know, my mum and dad got divorced, separated. I was over here in 1972. And yeah, we got fostered out, you know, and we had to do what we was told, and you know, there was big changes like go to bed at 6:30. You know, my mum and dad used to let me go to bed at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock, you know, because they were my parents. They, you know, we, as a kid, you sort of know how to put on your mum and dad. So, what's his name, to get that change of life, all of a sudden, it was just absolutely terrible. You know, I become to hate the world because of it. And like the kids what have been taken away and taken into care, you know, you just couldn't imagine how them kids or anybody, like mothers and fathers and the kids, how they would feel. I mean, you know, I don't know, like, if any of you's been taken into care or, you know, but I mean, I've got a lot of emotion while I still carry it on. I'm 49 years old, and I still carry that to this day, how I felt back then. And, you know, them kids are going to grow up and they're going to feel homeless all their lives if they don't get the parents back. And I was only taken for 18 months. So some of these kids don't see the parents. I mean, I really feel for them, because, I mean, they don't get a visit, they don't get a phone call, they get nothing. I mean, you know, so it is a sad case, and that's why, you know, I want to help you guys. And I want to help the children over there. I want to help Maggie, because she breaks her back every day to do this for the kids of the UK. And I think, you know, I think we should give her a round of applause, because you know, and like at the end of it, you know, like I really want to really say, I hope the song helps.
Oops.
Would you like to hear just a little bit of the song that's for our children screaming to be heard?
Yeah.
Calling me, calling you. Just a little. This is a bit. So true, those words. Calling you, calling me. I can't listen to it. However, our next guest, he should be the bloody Prime Minister. He really should. And then when we get our kids and our grandkids back and maybe a little bit more happiness. So there's not a lot I can say about him. He's been an idol for the families for years. Mr. John Hemming, please.
Okay, John, you're on.
All right, hello everybody.
Hi.
Is anybody here? Yes?
Everybody here, John?
Yes.
What do you want me to talk? You can hear me, right? Okay. How long have I got?
As long as you like.
Yeah, I know, but I could go on for hours and hours and hours and hours. What do you want me to talk about specifically? It may be best to do questions mainly. Okay. I'll tell you a few things that are going on at the moment, right?
Yeah.
Firstly, I'm trying to build up the Justice for Families campaigning by using a website called Nation Builder. And that allows people to register as supporters of Justice for Families. So far we have, I think, about 400 people who've registered in the last week. And one of the challenges is to demonstrate to the people in power, which is in many ways the judges actually on this front, that there is a large number of people who are very unhappy with the way the system goes wrong at the moment. We know, we know what it is.
Contrast, I think.
Social workers are under pressure to do the wrong thing. And if you look at the HCPC website, you find that from time to time, social workers are fired for lying to their managers, but they're never fired for lying about parents. And what you find is social workers like Joanna Quick, for instance, who wanted to, I think it's too slow for good video. I'm going to take off the video from your, what do you want? Do you want the sound or the video? Is the sound all right? Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Hello? You can hear me all right?
Everybody can hear you.
You find is social workers who want to, sorry?
I said everybody can hear you. You're going to be the Prime Minister.
Good. That's very kind of you. I think that's Maggie. What you find is that social workers at times are fired if they want to reunite families. And that's all from the pressure from people like Martin Neri, who are saying, you know, we've got to increase adoption numbers, etc. So we need to demonstrate that the groundswell of support, one of the objectives I have, is to get 100,000 signatures electronically on the government website to prove that there are over 100,000 people in this country.
Okay, John, we've got you back again. Can you hear us?
Good, right, lovely. It may be best just to have my video. Have you got my video and audio?
We've got audio, and we'll just leave your image up.
Yeah, happy with that. We just stay with audio rather than, because obviously the bandwidth isn't great enough.
Yeah, sure.
So what I'm trying to do is demonstrate there's a very strong and powerful groundswell on the ground of people who are unhappy about the fact that our child protection system is basically broken, and the family courts tolerate nonsense, effectively. We had even a case last week where a judge was going on and on and on about a grandfather lying about a family case, actually a private family law case. In fact, he was telling the truth, and the judge had decided he was lying, even though he had documentary evidence. So what I would ask following this conference is that people encourage people to sign up to the Justice for Families supporters list, so that when we actually launch the petition, we have a chance of getting the names to go up really quite quickly, rather than slowly, as tends to happen from time to time. Now, I think often the best thing I like to do is to answer people's questions, because if we've got a relatively limited amount of time, it's better that I answer questions that people ask than I just go on, because I can speak for 2 hours quite happily, but that's not necessarily answering the questions that people want. So, does anyone have any questions?
Please, Mr. Hemming, wanted to clarify.
That's very inaudible, so if somebody can get the microphone closer to him. If you want to ask a question, you come closer to wherever the microphone is, please.
Good morning, Mr. Hemming.
Yeah.
Hello. My child had revealed to me after the separation from my lovely wife that she revealed to me, and it was disclosure that she made to me only in my company. The first disclosure being sporadically we separated in July 2012. The mother worked for a company. The company that she worked for also owned a daycare nursery for children from the age 6 months to the age of 4 when they start primary school. Logistically, where we lived in Winchester at the time, the mother's office was in Tottenham. Further down the road in Fawley was the nursery. So it made logistical sense. We were never going to send 2 vehicles there. I attended the nursery one day on an open day, and that was the only time I ever went. The mother was good friends with all the staff, because obviously it's the same company, the same boss. When I visit the matrimonial home between July 2012 and June 2013, my child would sporadically call me David. She was 3. 17th to the 8th, 2009 is my child's.
What is the question you have for John? Because there's other people.
It does sound also private family law rather than public family law, but still.
What was instigated, John, was what she had revealed to me, that it kicked in to play a Section 47 investigation.
Yeah.
And creation of a CYP.
Yeah.
Is it normal procedure, because I've asked CAFCAS, I've asked the police, that conclusion of that investigation be disclosed to me prior to the resident mother being notified? Because when I was invited to the police station in Winchester for an update on their investigation, I don't even suspect that they had concluded their investigation, because when I had the invite, I called the mother and I said, have you heard anything from the police?
Yeah.
No, not a thing.
What I would say is that it's very difficult to give advice to somebody sitting in a room in Birmingham on Skype to a public meeting without seeing any of the documentation.
I've got it all with me.
Yeah, I know, but I'm sitting in a room in Birmingham, you've got the documentation there. Obviously, I do look at a hell of a lot of cases, but I only really do it if somebody's sitting with me and we've got the paperwork with us and we can see where it's going. So it's really very, very difficult. If you can work out what exactly your question is in that might help.
No, you can't because it's other people.
The problem is this, is that I can't do individual casework in a public meeting on Skype. I really can't. I can, if I'm going to do casework, I have to do it by looking at the paperwork. And there's I end up doing a vast amount of stuff as a constituency member of Parliament, dealing with everything that people come to me about. And with Justice for Families, we do have a casework system for looking at things. But we're very limited as to the number of cases we can actually take on. Much that we take cases all the way through to the European Court of Human Rights. Each one case takes a lot of work. So for instance, yesterday I did it actually was private family law, but for one of my constituents I did the appeal documentation from the Magistrates' Court to the County Court. But I can't do casework in this way. It just doesn't work out sensibly to anybody.
Thanks, Mr. Hemming. Belinda Mackenzie wants to speak to you now.
Yeah.
Hi, John. Hi. Thanks for coming in. Just for an update for the record, for the benefit of the people at this conference, who are all very interested in what's been going on in Parliament during June with calls for a national inquiry into organised child abuse. Can you just tell us where things are now? Because the mounting number of signatures, which I think at the last count reached 142 MPs in favour of a national inquiry, and then it was suddenly capped off dead because Theresa May, to whom the request was tabled, then announced that she would be setting up an inquiry into child abuse, and suddenly the voting, if you like, or the signing up to this inquiry stopped.
Well, Theresa May accepted the call for an overall inquiry. She suggested that Baroness Elizabeth Butler Schloss should be the chair of that inquiry and should participate in deciding who the members of the inquiry panel should be and what its terms of reference should be. There were a number of people, including myself, who said she was not an appropriate person for various complex reasons to head up that inquiry, and over a period of weeks, about a week, there was considerable public discussion about whether or not she was an appropriate chair of the inquiry, and there was a view expressed by a number of national newspapers that she wasn't an appropriate person to chair such an inquiry. Therefore, she basically stepped down as chair of the inquiry. Now, I had a meeting together with Tom Watson, Zach Goldsmith, Tessa Munt, I think Simon Danchuk was there, and Caroline Luke, together with Theresa May, not this week, but the week before, in which we said, well, that's we expressed concerns about Baroness Butler Schloss at that stage, but she then stepped down. We also said jointly that the inquiry should expand to include areas that the UK is responsible for, which includes obviously Jersey, should include the Isle of Man and St Helena, because there's some issues in St Helena at the moment as well. And I chair another group called Care Leavers Voice, which is, my role there is to facilitate the voice of care leavers, and care leavers are generally people in their 30s, 40s and 50s, including barristers such as Ivor Frank. And that group has come together to suggest some names of people who could be involved. So essentially where we're at the moment is that the government has agreed there should be a panel. Names are being put forward for that panel. We are supporting Michael Mansfield QC because he's willing to do it depending on the timing. And he would be not necessarily a tool of the establishment. We don't want somebody who's a safe pair of hands who will be good at covering things up. We want somebody who will get to the truth. So essentially the reason why the numbers of MPs signing up to call for the inquiry has stopped is because the government agreed to have an inquiry, and therefore, because the policy has changed, people are not calling for it to change because it has changed. The Baroness Butler-Schloss stood down, which is good, and so we're now in a situation we don't know who's chairing and what
John,
who the members are or what terms of reference is, but at least we do have.
They're interfering with it again.
Well, it looked.
If I can hear, can you hear me?
Got you. Yes. Carry on, John.
Appointing Lady Butler-Schloss looked to me.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes, fine.
Yeah.
Look, what?
Appointing Lady Butler-Schloss looked to me a little bit like a stalling exercise to stop this torrent of MPs signing up for a national inquiry.
Well,
what if 200 had signed up, 300, 400? What?
Yeah, but the point was to get the government to change policy, and the government changed policy.
Yes.
So, you know, once the government changes policy, everyone says, good, the government has changed policy.
Well, I'm very interested in the demographic of Parliament on this issue, because I would like to see the vast majority of MPs that we elect to protect all citizens, and including the youngest citizens, very much putting them as a priority. I would like to see everybody register to protect children who sit in our Parliament, and that's why I'm frustrated personally.
Yeah, well, I don't think. Yeah, I don't. The thing is, the way things work is that the government has a policy, and people lobby from time to time to change the policy. And the government changes the policy, people stop trying to get them to change the policy because they've changed it.
Important then not to stall.
Yes. Well, I hope it doesn't take too long before we get another chair, because this needs to go on. The momentum was built up in 2014.
No.
And it needs
That's
to go
true.
on.
That's,
it's a very big opportunity.
That's true, but there is a conflict, which is I would prefer Michael Mansfield as the chair, but he's not immediately available, but would be available quite soon. So there is an argument. You see, the point is that cover-ups have gone on for a long time. The system is actually very good at covering things up, because when there's an inquiry, what tends to happen is the head of a department says to all of his staff, are you doing a good job? And they say, yeah, we're doing a good job. And so it's like if you look at the MSBP issue, for instance. The government, about 12 years ago, I don't know precisely when, said to all the children's services authorities, they were called social services then, have you done any wrongful cases for MSBP? And they all went around saying, no, 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 we've done everything perfectly well and we're absolutely perfect. But years later on, we find there are lots of miscarriages of justice, because basically people tend not to put their hand up and say, no, I've committed a criminal offence. They tend not to do that. So the problem with inquiries is they need to be investigative. They can't just be asking people if they've done a good job.
There seem to be all sorts of possible solutions for this problem put forward by various people on various fronts. One is for a royal commission into child abuse. Somebody is very keen on that, who's a big campaigner in this campaign.
Yeah.
But that would be 5 years.
We are now, we have an overarching inquiry agreed. And having got one agreed, it's better, rather than to try and completely derail it, to see what should be changed about the contents of that. So that's what we're working on at the moment.
Good. Thank you, John.
All right.
Can I just ask you a question? It's Maggie Tuttle.
Yes, I know. I can recognise your voice, can't I?
Oh, I don't know. I haven't spoken to you that often, I'm sure.
You have, and you've been in Parliament.
I know, and throughout.
Yes, exactly.
However, the families or the parents who have gagging orders already, is there anything in the pipeline to get rid of those gagging orders from them?
There are ways of getting around gagging orders if you look at the details of what's involved and how it works. And to be fair to Sir James Mumby, he has been, what used to happen is they used to interpret gagging orders very broadly, and now they interpret them much more narrowly. So it's almost invariably the case that there's some way around these things. but it is something that, that not necessarily naming children, but actually going into the truth about what's been going wrong. Not least, for instance, you should be able to get judgments published even if anonymously by making an application to the court. But as I said, each one of these things is an individual case which needs to be handled in the way of an individual case. But this week, Janice Skelch petitioned Parliament. She was subject to a gagging order about something slightly different. The previous week, Monty Aurora, I think it was 2 weeks ago, Monty Aurora petitioned Parliament. She was subject to a gagging order.
Right, well, I'm back in the court and I'm still threatened 7 years in prison.
Well, yes, I know, but the difficulty is, again, we're back to the question about casework and looking through paperwork. And my problem is this, is that I actually, believe it or not, a human being. I need to sleep from time to time. There are 24 hours a day. I've got to do my constituency work. I've got to do all sorts of other things as well. And within that, I can handle a small number of cases. And within Justice for Families, we can handle a small number of cases. But you need to go through it step by step in the right way.
Well, my MP is completely bloody useless. I should be the MP for Leeds.
Well, I'm not going to comment about any other MP. It doesn't help.
No, anyway, I'm going to pass you on to another lady.
That's all right.
Hello, John. It's Maya Burnwood-Hedger. Hello?
Yeah.
Yes, hello. Yes, just to continue the MP subject. I have been in touch with my MP about my son being in care since I've been talking to her since December.
Yeah.
It's Helen Grant. I wrote to her in December, and she actually passed my letter. Well, it was my partner, I think, who wrote to her first. She passed his letter to Edward Timpson.
Yeah.
So not surprisingly, though, we got a few weeks later, we got a response from Edward Timpson, basically saying the system is okay, the councils know themselves what to do. So that letter, Helen Grant sent back to Kent County Council, and basically they couldn't really comment on that. Afterwards, we met with Helen Grant, and Helen Grant said, well, I think you should go to the appeal, but afterwards I'll write to Chris Grayling, the Justice Secretary, and say this is quite a normal family which is suffering all this injustice, so something is not working in the country. So eventually Helen Grant wrote to Chris Grayling. Chris Grayling apparently said to her he doesn't deal with those matters. So she wrote to Shalishvara, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly.
Yeah.
Yes, and again we didn't hear anything for weeks.
Yeah.
So I just been back to Helen Grant's office, and her assistant said to me, Shalishvara basically said he doesn't deal with it. So who do you think he passed the letter to? Edward Timpson, just again.
Yes, I know. Yeah. What it is it's a constitutional issue, and the problem lies primarily in the judicial estate of the Constitution. Now, I have another private member's bill this year which comes for its second reading on the 17th of October, Transparency and Accountability Bill. And in terms of one of the key things in that bill, which is still not really being dealt with, is the concept that family court proceedings should be subject to academic scrutiny. That is, specialists who do know what they're talking about, rather than experts who get paid for writing twaddle. People who've got borderline personality disorders and things like that. The evidence from Jane Ireland's work is obvious there as well. But basically, that you actually have competent people looking at the judgments. The difficulty is that, you go back to the question I asked of Gordon Brown when he was apologising for the home children being sent to Canada and Australia. I stood up and said, won't you be apologising to the many people whose children have been wrongly taken off them now? And he said, send me the individual cases. So I send them the individual cases, and they say, we don't comment on individual cases. Well, this is one of the problems with the way Parliament works, which is you generally only get one proper question, and you don't get a follow-up question. So if I've had a chance to ask him a second question, because I've sent you all the individual cases, and you don't comment on them, then it'll take it further on. So what you're encountering there is the issue. And to challenge the failure of the judicial estate of the Constitution, if you're interested in the legal case, there's a legal case called Lashin versus Russia. And what that legal case says is that any expert evidence should be independent of the parties involved. which means that social workers' evidence should not be taken into account in making decisions about adoption, for instance, because they are subject to managerial pressures to say adoption is the solution. Now, all of that, this is where lovely people like Sue Reed, who I believe is speaking to you at some stage, she's very, very good, and she needs to highlight publicly the failures of the system, which she's willing to do if people work with her. So that's what, that's actually where we need to go in terms of sorting out the judicial estate. At the same time, what I would want to do, if everyone signs up to the Justice for Families campaign on Nation Builder, what I would like to do is also put pressure on MPs to back the Transparency and Accountability Bill, which will be published very soon for consultation purposes. But as I said, the key part of that, there's a number of important elements to it, not least giving a voice to children in care, the children who are screaming to be heard because they're ignored. But also making sure that what is said in family courts is of some intellectual value rather than just twaddle.
Yes, that's a very good point.
And that's the problem. You're encountering a constitutional problem. The MPs don't always understand this, because when people come to them, they normally write to the minister. And actually, in this instance, they shouldn't write to the minister. They should write to the chair of the Education Select Committee, because Parliament can criticise the judiciary if it wishes to. Whereas ministers are not supposed to. That's an important distinction. One of the reasons I wish to be a backbencher is so that I can tell the truth about everything. I'm not gagged by being a minister and only able to say things relevant to my subject and not criticise the judges. When you've got judges messing it up, most of I say Sir James Mundy is a very good judge. There are lots of other judges who are not very good, some of them are absolutely awful. And I can say that because I'm not a minister.
But why are they not being struck off? These judges are failing.
Somebody, I think, said at the back, why are they not being struck off? Because it's actually quite difficult to get the evidence together to prove that. We're trying to get a transcript at the moment of a case where the judge behaved awfully and was not doing his judicial job properly or anything like that. I wouldn't be too surprised if we don't manage to get that transcript, because it's a secret court and it's difficult to get hold of.
John, do you think there's social engineering going on a higher level? Where they
I think there may be a theory of that happening. A lot of it is people don't actually know what's going on. I do talk to other members of Parliament, and you know, they are, a lot of them are aware that the care system is completely nuts.
But they're using the social services and family court in order to restructure the whole society, take away the kids, and give them into the minority kind of groups.
I don't think that's actually true. I know that that's what's happened.
I've seen the articles in my local newspaper where they say LGTB, whatever, you're welcome. But they make up the
sad thing is, most of the time, where government goes wrong, it's because government is incompetent, not because there is a conspiracy to do the wrong thing. Now and again there's a conspiracy, but most of the time it's a cock-up. And in this instance, the government and the civil service are getting things wrong because they don't know the truth, which is why we have to get the truth out there in the newspapers, why we have to do, I think, that, you know, more of the, this is why I want to get the numbers demonstrated, because there are lots and lots of people, many hundreds of thousands, who are not at all happy about what's going on, and we need to highlight that.
So how many MPs are supporting Justice for Families?
Well, I haven't tried to get that strictly identified, because it's a matter of persuading additional MPs to back us. And the way you persuade MPs is by persuading their constituents and by having issues to campaign on, such as I said, the Transparency and Accountability Bill. But at the end of the day, what you have is an establishment of the judiciary, the civil servants, the ministers, the heads of children's services, etc., etc. And I was talking to a chief executive of a council who said he agreed with me, but he wasn't in a position to say so publicly. And that's very difficult. So we have to keep, this is where the campaigning is very important, but you have to do the campaigning in the right way. And as I said, things like working with Sue Reed is very good, or people like Ted Shearing, they're very good, or Christopher Booker, he's very good. and also getting things properly in the public domain, getting judgments published now which can get them published, even if that's anonymous, and showing that the evidence doesn't justify the judgment. That's important as well.
But we want to see more MPs helping you. You can't do this on your own.
I'm not working. Obviously, I'm working on my own in the sense of working with Justice for Families. But there are other MPs who do back me up when necessary. But we have to have the right thing. So if we've got 100,000 people who've signed a petition, I could then go to other MPs and say, well, can we have a debate on a motion in Parliament that says child protection in England is broken? Do you see what I mean? But I have to start in the right place. So first, we have to build people who can. Once we've got a petition table, we can go around getting signatures for it quickly, not sort of slowly. Because we need to get 100,000, you see.
But I thought somebody told me that even if you had 1,000, you could go along with 1,000 or 2,000, John, was it?
I happen to sit on the backbench business committee, and I'm telling you that you need 100,000 for an automatic debate on a Monday in Westminster Hall. That's the first step. And the second step after that would be to go for a motion. But we need to show that there's a groundswell of support across the country first.
Well, I think if everybody in this room, and there's about 100 and something here, if we all went away and we all got signatures, even if we went into the streets and everything.
Yeah, I'm asking you not to do. I'm asking you to sign up to the things. So we've got some of the people in the room probably already have done, but sign up to the thing on Nation Bill. The URL, I can email somebody the URL later on, because that way we have the chance of actually doing a number of things rather than just having one go. We need to be in a situation to have a number of goes.
Someone find that URL and put it in the chat,
It's just that nobody
please.
seems to sign anything online. That's what I'm thinking about.
Yes, but the problem is there are a lot of things online, and a lot of them made no difference at all. So you have to do things in a way that has an impact. So if you do something on change.com, that actually doesn't necessarily make a change. I know it says change.com, but it doesn't necessarily make a change. If you do something on the UK government site and you get enough signatures, then I see the paperwork from the numbers of signatures. So I see the other end of all of this because I sit on the relevant committee that sees the outcome.
John?
Yes?
2 quick questions. My name's Alan Taylor-Shearer. I'm a journalist from LPN News and a former...
LPN, please?
LPN. Yes.
What's LPN?
Live Pulse News. I'm a former police officer for 18 years, and I want to ask you 2 very quick questions. Firstly, if evidence is presented in an inquiry, is it true that it can't be used in the court at a later date?
If you have evidence that is presented in a parliamentary inquiry, then that evidence is subject to parliamentary privilege. And the legal position of that is very complex. And there is a case called Pepper v. Hart that said that you can use some information that's in parliamentary proceedings. But the Parliament is a separate jurisdiction. The High Court of Parliament, the House of Commons and the House of Lords are both in theory High Courts, and they have separate jurisdictions. And what is said in Parliament is only controlled by Parliament. It's not controlled by the courts, and I think everyone would be pleased that that's the case. So, to some extent, if you take on the hacking saga, the comments made by Rebecca Brooke in Parliament were not able to be directly used as evidence. But other inquiries is difficult, and you've then got to look at issues about prejudicing a trial, because if something is too publicised, it might be arguable that it would prejudice any jury to the extent that somebody couldn't have a fair trial. So you've got those 2 points.
Thank you. And the second point is, would you be in favour of restricting the actual physical use that police officers can use when they are assisting social workers in the removal of children?
People don't follow the proper procedures. So there are limits in terms of the police protection order stuff. There are limits there. And if we've had situations where they've been talking about using a PPO, and we've been able to make the point, well, that's not valid. You can't use a PPO in those circumstances. So there are, what it is, a lot of the time, there is a sort of view, well, this is supposed to be for the children, and therefore we'll do it, even if it's not actually in accordance with the law. So to me, it would be a very good start if everybody followed the law, because if they followed the law, things would be a lot better than it is at the moment.
The only reason I ask that is because over my 18 years as a police officer, I spent many an occasion backing up social workers and punching fathers in the face so that babies could be removed.
Yeah, well, but the point is that you shouldn't be there removing babies. Well, it depends on the legal circumstances and everything like that. But a lot of the babies that are removed unlawfully, even under PPOs. And if you study the PPO detail, even that is wrong.
You see, police officers don't get the information. We're simply told, go and back up that social worker and do what is needed to get the baby out.
That's right, and they don't know why the situation is the case, and they think perhaps these parents are some lethal monstrosity who's going to murder the baby in 5 minutes.
Which is why I would ask that some actual restrictions are put in place.
Well, there are restrictions in place. The thing is, basically, the police need to, if you end up, and this is where actually, if you're good at these sorts of things, and you've got a case which is coming up, you can then approach the police properly and say, well, actually, you don't have authority to use Section 86 or whatever, 87, I don't know which one it is, but whichever, it's in the 80s, I think, of the Children's Act here, because those circumstances do not apply. But again, it's all a question of great detail, and you have to look at individual cases.
Well, thankfully, I'm on the other side of the line now.
Well done, mate.
But they know how to handle all of this.
John, I'm speaking again on behalf of the disabled lady who can't get up the aisle to speak to herself.
That's all right.
Mickey. She wants to know what's the advantage of a parliamentary inquiry. You've gone into this a little bit, so we've got one or two of the answers, as against putting the whole thing over to a police investigation unit or upgrading the existing units.
Well, let me ask the meeting here, what trust do people have of just having another police inquiry? Right? Well, you see, that sort of is where the issue lies. The difficulty is these things have always, they've gone to the police and then somebody's covered things up. And they've gone to the police and somebody's covered things up. And over the years, one of the things that needs to happen, in my view, is that there needs to be a monitoring of the individual allegations and the response from the police to avoid things being covered up again. Because you see signs, you know, to me the appointment of Baroness Butler-Schloss was a move by the establishment to make sure nothing new came out of it.
Mr. Hemming, my name's Kira. Now, my children were taken by an accusation of witchcraft by the social workers.
Yeah.
And my partner and I did some research on this, and we found out that not just us, but many other parents have been accused of witchcraft-related child abuse. Now,
yes.
I know that Tim Loughton is putting procedures in place to stop this. I'm just wondering if you were aware of what that was going on.
Well, again, it's one where it's worth looking at the individual case. Actually, the imprisonment of Wanda Maddox in Parliament was because of allegations of witchcraft, if you're interested. That's in the judgment. Again, it's a question, I must admit I'm not a massive fan of Tim Lawton and his work as the Children's Minister, because I don't think he really made any progress on any of these issues.
Don't you agree that taking away children, it's already in itself a witchcraft from parents?
Well, it obviously isn't witchcraft, it's a wrongful action by the state.
Yeah, but it's satanic, to take away the child from the parents.
It's not right, it's evil, but it's not witchcraft.
See, the confusing thing is, we never mentioned witchcraft to the social workers at all. They just came up with it on their own.
Yeah, well, without actually looking at the paperwork, I can't comment specifically, as to what the background to it is. But people remember, I think, the satanic abuse saga in Rochdale, don't they?
Yeah.
Now, so the interesting thing about the satanic abuse saga is where children were wrongly taken into care, and those children had not been abused, and then when they were put in care, they were abused.
Yeah, well, my opinion is, I think still think the satanic ritual abuse accusations are still taking place even today.
I don't deny that, but as I said, one of the difficulties of the lack of transparency in the system is you don't know how much of this is going on. So there is no central record as to how many cases where there's an allegation of, say, FII, or there's an allegation of ritual abuse or something else like that. We just don't know.
Are you aware that pets are now being used against families?
That's not new.
Oh, right.
The idea that somebody who abuses their dog will also abuse the child, say, depending on what abusing a dog is, because sometimes it is argued that to have a dog in an overcrowded house is maltreating the animal, and therefore the animal should be put down. So, you know, that's not new, that's been going on for some time.
All right. You are the news of the world, I know. That's it. You want more? Quickly then, because it's just useful to speak.
Mr. Herman, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, hi. My name's Jennifer Monteith. It's just a quick one, really. I was informed that in a closed court, it's just like in Parliament, evidence can't be reused. In fact, defamation of character against parents and evidence that parents bring forward to the courts can be dismissed at the discretion of the judge, you know, as they see fit. Don't you feel that that's wrong? And shouldn't we abolish these closed courts and give parents, you know, a fair trial and a fair chance to actually prove that the information that is given is either incorrect or completely inaccurate?
I've already effectively said that today. Yeah, this is what I tried to do in the Family Justice Bill in 2012, and I'm trying to do again in the Transparency and Accountability Bill. And the judges will always have some discretion as to which evidence they include or which one they don't include. But that's where you need the public accountability. Because if you've got a judge who is mentally ill, that judge should not be a judge. And if that, you know, if it's all secret, then the judge's misbehaviour remains secret. So there needs to be greater accountability so that judges can't get away with being completely random on how they see evidence. Because in theory their job is to sift the evidence and work out what's true and what's not. It doesn't seem to work very well.
Okay, well thank you for your answer. It's just that I've been in and out trying to help people come through, and I didn't hear what you said earlier on, so I do apologise, but thank you. Thank you for your answer.
That's it. Have we run out of questions?
Well, no, but we've run out of time, I think, Mr. Hemming, because...
Well, if we run out of time, we run out of time.
Because,
basically,
oh, no, sorry, there's one more.
I'm in London. If Parliament's not sitting, as a rule, I'm in Birmingham. So I'd be very happy to be present at an event, but it's got to be where I am, if you see what I mean, rather than the other end, well, not the other end of the country, because Birmingham's sort of in the middle.
Mr. Hemming, I've got another question from a gentleman.
Go on then.
Hello, Herman Kurz. I'm helping a victim of the family court system whose child has been taken away. What I don't understand is why the recent family bill came up with that very strict 26 weeks time limit to process cases. That makes it even more difficult for the accused parents to defend themselves.
There's two things about that. The first thing is, in a sense, the basic thing is the court is not the best way of doing what is a therapeutic decision. It would be better to have a strengthened case conference trying to look not so much on an adversarial basis, but with independence from the local authority. So the first thing is the way the court's divided is not a good way of doing it. The second thing is that there are a lot of parent solicitors on legal aid who basically do what the local authority want. They don't fight for their clients. They betray their the clients from time to time. And if you look at the statistics, you would find that the change to 26 weeks has not had a big impact on the number of cases the local authorities win or the parents win. The third point I would make is that if the judge wants to go for more than 26 weeks, they can do. There is an interesting question as to whether Holding it to 26 weeks makes it harder for the local authority to manufacture expert evidence to justify their case from time to time, because I've seen a number of cases where the local authority has failed with the first expert, so tries for another expert, fails with the second expert, tries for another one, and then finally, after about 7 or 8 months, they get an expert who'll say what they want, and then they win the case. So it's not necessarily the case that that's biased against the parents. I still don't think it's necessarily helpful. However, actually, the court environment is the wrong environment for dealing with these issues. They should be done through effectively a sort of family group conference type arrangement.
I found
with a certain amount of independence.
One final question there is the Ofsted report on Kafka's was good, and no mention was made of contested cases. Why is that?
Well, you've got to think this is the usual situation of the system investigating itself. Yeah. So Ofsted and Kafkas, they're all good friends with each other to a very great extent. They're not going to come out with something which says actually it's all corrupt and awful and people die all the time, are they?
Yeah. Thank you.
We'll be right back.
So we can build up a more effective grassroots petitioning structure. Yeah?
Brilliant. Thanks, John.
Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.
I'm sorry we've had to cut John off, but we've got a very important journalist here today, Sue Reed, from the Daily Mail, and she's been writing lots of things about the children, and she's got to come and she's got to go quickly. I know that. She's in a rush. So Sue's going to speak about something slightly different, I think. Vicky Haig and the women such as Vicky Haig. So I'll hand you over to Sue. Thank you, Sue.
Daily Mail journalist Sue Reed.
Well, I'm actually reading Vicky Hayes' speech because Vicky can't be here because she's elsewhere in the world, because she's protecting her second child from being stolen by the state. So, these are Vicky's words, not mine, though I endorse them actually. I apologise for not attending in person this important conference challenging child stealing by child protection organisations with the support of the UK government. I often wonder how successive governments have managed to keep secret what is happening and what some journalists try to report on, despite the threat of being gagged and imprisoned for doing so. Parents and children are left devastated when the state steal their children for no good reason. I had no idea what was happening and would not have believed such a thing until it happened to me, and my child was stolen too. I have lost count of the times that I've been in a family court, a criminal court, a police cell, a prison cell, or the times I have been arrested by the police. I am not a criminal, just a mother trying to protect my child from the hands of someone who I believe, because of what my own child has told social workers and the police, is a sexual predator. Now I realise that my child not only needed to be protected from that predator, but from the government and its many agencies, which are hugely corrupt, part of a hugely corrupt money-making industry. Would you disagree with me that this country has a serious child protection malfunction? Yes. No child is safe in the UK, and the biggest predator of our children is the state itself. Yes. While the police, the media, lawyers, the NSPCC and other so-called child protection charities rake up historical paedophilia cases with links right to the heart of the establishment in the 70s and 80s, no one is admitting the truth. That there is a strong link between today's paedophiles and the systematic snatching of children for forced adoption, forced fostering, and into this shamefully bad and hugely expensive care system. There have also been many cases of child sexual abuse in foster and adoption families. Meanwhile, 1 in 5 adoptions break down. That is kept secret. Only for the unwanted child to be thrown back into the care system where sex abuse is rife. We know that the care system has already been infiltrated by paedophiles. Look at the South Asian sex gangs of our northern towns. Who do you think these men were targeting? Yes, underage girls, often taken forcibly from their families and put in the care system. You cannot make the police prosecute a crime of paedophilia if they do not want to. Look at the cases of Cyril Smith and Jimmy Savile. They escaped prosecution for years. The police had an abundance of intelligence on these criminals and did nothing. We are seeing that the prison sentences given for paedophiles in our courts are laughable.
Yep.
That is when they are actually prosecuted by the police. Why is this so? I can speak about prison sentences as I have experience of them. I am a woman, a mother of 2 young and beautiful daughters. After the secret family court stole my eldest daughter in cold blood from me, claiming I had brainwashed her into making up stories about sex attacks on her, I investigated the big picture. After campaigning to highlight our plight, I thought someone from the government would soon step in and overturn the incredible, the illogical injustice. I was sure about that. What actually happened was the opposite. It was me they put injunctions on to silence me. It was me who they bullied and blackmailed. And it was me they put in prison. I realised I had made a very powerful enemy, and I was intrigued to find out more. The UK child care system is riddled with corruption. If you report the sexual abuse of your child, or support your child who tells the authorities that he or she has been sexually abused by a family member, or indeed anyone else, if you allow that child to have medical examinations at the request of the authorities, it is you that is accused of emotionally harming that child. Corrupt as it may sound, the UK government seems to have an allegiance with child sex abusers and not the parent trying to protect the child. Why is this? You are all listening in disbelief, apart from the parents who have blown the whistle on child abusers and found, as a result, it is their own children who have been taken away. Some given to the abuser and others put in the care system. The judges are allowing draconian removal orders. Our government is not interested in the cries for help. How can it be that I have not been allowed to see or contact my own child for almost 4 years? What is my wrongdoing? Can you imagine what this must feel like for a mother and child? But this is happening to many thousands of others in the UK today. Why are family court judges the patrons and directors of adoption and foster agencies? Why are so-called medical and social work experts who get thousands of pounds for producing independent reports on the removal of children? Why are these people in the family courts but also on the adoption and foster agency payrolls too. This is corruption. Some former social workers have set up companies to adopt and foster children. To make money, they must have lots of children. It is child trafficking in the UK, and it's a very profitable trade. This is why so many children are being stolen from their families. Is this why the courts are so secret, with parents and journalists being told and being sent to prison for contempt if they publicise what is going on there? These are questions we need answering, and answering quickly. I was told by my barrister from a chambers in Leeds, after she lost my case, which I now realise was fixed, she said, "This is the system. What are you going to do about it, Vicky? Start a revolution?"
Yeah. Sounds a good idea to me.
I was actually being told that the system worked on the basis that if you report abuse of your child could be taken into care or given to an alleged abuser. Serious crimes against children are being hidden and covered up in these courts. I struggled to believe that my barrister was actually informing me that it was no mistake that I lost my daughter. It was by design, even though she, the barrister, knew I was innocent. Surely this barrister needs arresting and charging with extortion. She is using public money to assist case fixing in a UK court. She knew that I would be gagged by Doncaster Council and that she would get away with her crimes. If the police are interested in interviewing her, I can give them her name. In fact, I can give them a whole list of names of corrupt people in this cruel, callous and broken system. Which leads me to the question of who is actually protecting the child. Certainly not the state, as we are seeing more and more evidence that the state is damaging the young children of this country and blocking the parents from protecting them, using legal means and the threat of prison. So my barrister's advice on starting a revolution was probably the only good bit of advice she gave me. I see Kafkas, the organisation that is costing the taxpayer millions of pounds a year, had a conference recently when it stated it was the voice of the child in the secret court. It is not the voice of the child at all, and their officials routinely go against the wishes of the child, pushing that child into care or assisting the local authority in obtaining the care order. This, again, would be called child trafficking in any other country. Let the public see all of the complaints regarding Kafkas. Let them see my complaints, of which there are many. There are some very unsavoury Kafkas officers out there with powers they are using corruptly. I can give you an example of what my daughter's Kafkas officer wrote in his statement for the secret court, and I quote, "If X, my daughter, says that she has been sexually abused in the future, we have to tell her she has not. Can you ever imagine anything worse for my child who is screaming to be heard? How dangerous is this? How dangerous is this Kafkas officer? And how can he be the voice of any child? He needs striking off, not the prospect, he needs striking off, not the prospect of retiring with a healthy pension paid by all of us. Again, if the police are interested in this man covering up crimes against a child, I can pass his name on. Why are local authorities being encouraged to take away children who are happy with their loving families? Are innocent parents like me being used to create more business? And who is looking after these hundreds and thousands of children, even babies, when they are removed? Would it be any surprise if paedophile rings are operating within this system? I have smelt a rat for a very long time, and I want the government to tell us what the hell is going on here. Why in particular are children snatched and then put to live with paedophiles who they then say have abused them? The secret family court and social service system is a child sex predator's playground. How many paedophiles are involved in this racket? How they must laugh when they watch yet another child being stolen from an innocent parent and put in the care and fostering system. Paedophiles have been known to wait years to get on the adoption list so they can get control of a child. Yet nothing is done. Apart from the fears about paedophilia, you will see it is routine for a mother like me who raises the alarm to be castigated, and the person accused of sexual abuse to get the prize, the child. Babies are being stolen at birth from innocent mothers who are accused of having the potential to emotionally harm the child when they are older, even by shouting at them as a teenager in some distant future. By widening the pit, so many fall into it, and more children are removed. There is not a child caught up in the UK care system that is not being abused by the state, emotionally abused by the state. Sir James Mundy is making plans to open up the family court to the public. Well, I am asking Sir James Mundy not to just make noises, but to remove all the reporting restriction orders and super injunctions that have been placed on parents in these family courts. I want to see Sir James not only talk about opening up the court, but actually doing so. So what goes on there can be reported with names of the parents published, if those parents wish, as many do. Let the public see exactly what is happening to innocent parents and children under the guise of best interests of the child, a term first used by Hitler in Nazi Germany. Take the gags off these women and men, Sir James. Let them speak out, as I am doing. I have fought for my daughter all the way and knew nothing about the corruption until she was stolen. I had my gag lifted after John Hemming names me in the House of Commons. I have taken so long to speak out, but I had a prison sentence to serve first, and then I had to get my other child to safety. It is better late than never. I am telling you what I've seen and experienced. A democratic country should not be harming its families, then gagging them to silence their protests. This is not democracy, and it has to stop. The UK courts are ignoring our human rights. Families are being broken up, stoking massive problems for those children in the future. It is atrocious. Even the right of appeal is being denied to families who have had their children taken. I know, it happened to me. How is it that the state can kidnap your child, abuse your power, yet if you try and take your stolen property back, this is a crime for which you are locked up? How can the UK get away with cutting open a woman without her knowledge and stealing her baby from her womb to sell it in an adoption racket? If this crime had happened in any other arena, apart from so-called UK child protection, it would be life in prison or worse. If I can get a message across to you all, it is this. We have to change this system. We cannot let this carry on into the next generation, where our children will live in fear of having their children taken by the corrupt and inhumane government. Insider trading is illegal, but I have serious concerns that the same kind of corruption is going on in the foster and adoption industries. I am therefore asking these questions of the government. 1. We need a public inquiry and disclosure from our government on how many child protection workers hold conflicting posts and directorships. When will this happen? Why are family courts holding child sex abuse cases behind a wall of secrecy, where family evidence counts for nothing, and every child taken means payments to lawyers, social workers, adoption agencies and foster carers? This is a criminal matter, and why does the government not stop it? MOSAC, which stands for Mothers of Sexually Abused Children, is a government-funded organisation, yet we are not allowed to know the horrendous statistics that it has collected on incest and abuse within the care system. Why are they secret? Why are we being punished by having our children taken from us when we have committed no crime? We want non-molestation orders used correctly and not placed on innocent parents when the council has stolen their children. How many orders of this nature are there? Why is perjury and case fixing by social workers, lawyers and judges happening every day in the courts? And why is the government ignoring it and not prosecuting them? Why are our children who are screaming to be heard not being listened to in line with the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child? We want the gagging orders on all the parents lifted, and we want our rights to protest openly reinstated without us being imprisoned. I am a mother with a duty to protect my child who says she has been abused, and I want the government to tell me why it is not letting me do this. These are legitimate questions, and we have the right to know the answers.
Can we say thank you very much?
Oh, thank you. Coming. Thank you so much. Very kind. Thank you.
What? Can I ask that lady one question?
Oh, sorry.
Can you tell me anything about a D notice? Does it apply to you at this stage?
No, this is certainly the D notice. But
why is it that I've written to so many newspapers and they won't even take the story?
Well, I mean, they don't often use a D notice on the family courts. It's more likely to be a security issue.
Security issue?
Yeah, intelligence.
Thanks, Bill.
But, I mean, they do plenty of other things. I mean, we get threatened with imprisonment every week.
I think there's something to do with it. This is why we get no publicity in the papers. None of the good people here will get publicity.
Well, I don't know. There's a fair amount, but we are under
there's so many people, maybe one case. Think about it.
They do try their best, but we do need a big campaign with the media as well.
People power is required.
Thanks. And he's actually speaking on the drugging of the children, which I'm sure you're all aware of. So hi Brian, I didn't know you was at the back there, quiet.
I sneaked in, Maggie.
So thank you, Brian.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Maggie. I'm glad to be here, and obviously it's a very emotive subject, what's going on here today. And from my position with the Citizens Commission on Human Rights, I've listened to many parents who've called me and obviously our office. And what's the primary thing that we've noted, whilst you've got a situation here, we hear about cases like yours, but the focus that we have is where children are being told that they have a mental disorder. Is that real to you? Okay, so there's some here who recognise that. Now, before I joined CCHR, I was interested in the welfare of young people. I was one of them. You know, we've all been there, so we want to know that, you know, when we grow up, we're going to have something that's, you know, it's going to be a good place to go. They are, you know, young people are the future, they're the forward leaders, they're the strategists. They're the ones who will mould nations, who will make it all happen, whether it's good or whether it's bad. Now, from a human rights perspective, I personally developed a strong purpose in working towards a social construct where we were given the opportunities to expand, where, you know, like me as a child, me as a young person, I could expand, I could express myself, and I could assist others through an understanding of moral values to do that from a viewpoint of human rights. I hope that comes across. I wanted to make sure that other people could help each other just from basic human rights principle. And what I've heard here today, it's tough. It's really rough for some of you. We don't know that all the time because you don't necessarily get an opportunity to express your words in the press. And I think it's great that someone like Sue Reed is here and listening to you. Now, there's been an introduction of a contemporary method in addressing childhood problems that's seen a rapid decline in the standards of what's going on in this world. And I want to briefly go over that so that you can see how this particular method has become embedded in the social construct that we have today. That method alludes to the involvement of redefining and reclassifying certain behaviours. Now, again, certain things that parents do have been redefined and reclassified. Would I be correct? You know, what you've been told is going wrong with you is because something has been redefined, reclassified, recategorised. Someone is doing it. Now, it's a method that's born out of observation and the interpretation of the way that children and adolescents act and interact with each other. It's not based on sound, rigorous, scientific scrutiny or testing. It's basically somebody looking at you, deciding what you do, whether that's right or wrong. How do they know? There's no scientific testing. There's nothing rigorous to say that what they've just said is true. It's their opinion. Now, the Citizens Commission on Human Rights has been campaigning for decades to raise the awareness of the plight of school children subjected to this methodology. As I go along, you'll probably go, oh yeah, I know where you're coming from. Now, one doesn't have to look very far in the society to see how this particular practice has kind of infiltrated into everyday life, everyday problems, and where it's been reclassified as a mental illness. I doubt that it's commonly known. I'm just going to go over a few little ones with you, but there's an actual impairment in reading, writing, and arithmetic that's been wrongly reclassified as something called specific learning disorders. Now, has anyone come across any particular disorders as you've gone through your plights yourself? Anyone come across that? You've been told, okay, you've been told something. Okay, thank you. There's these three things that I just want to tell you. I've got a book here. It's this. I know it's a bit small, but it's called the DSM. Man there knows? Okay. Now, reading, writing, and arithmetic have been included in the 5th edition of this book. They've even got their own coding. And get this, number 315 in here is called Specific Learning Disorder with Impairment in Reading. You get that? If you've got an impairment in reading, you're listed in here under the Manual of Mental Disorders. If you've got specific learning disorder with impairment in mathematics, number 315.1, you're listed in here. If you've got specific learning disorder with impairment in written expression, you're in here too under number 315.2. So reading, writing and arithmetic, the 3 R's as we used to call them, because I'm a bit older than maybe some of you, is listed in here. Somehow that doesn't seem right. But someone is redefining what is essentially normal. Then we come to the case that a lot of you may already know about, and that is boisterous, argumentative or disruptive children. Anyone ever met one? Yeah. Okay. You are one. Okay. Now, they are now classified as having a disorder on the basis of diagnostic criteria drawn up by a committee. And by the way, that criteria is included in here. And it's called Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. Okay, we've got some nods here. Otherwise known as ADHD. Now, for anyone who's... I've met kids with ADHD, and you'll notice I use quotation marks. It's a reclassification of normal childhood behaviour. And what I wanted to compare this with what I've heard already here today. Normal. What is normal? You've probably been told you're not normal, so therefore your kids are going to be taken away. Kids are being told they're not normal, and therefore they're being reclassified as mentally ill. Who's doing the reclassification? Who's making that judgment? What we try to do is to allow a parent or anyone to make a fully informed choice. Whereas your choices, from what I hear, are being taken away from you, you're not even allowed to make that choice. It's just snatching. When it comes to children, who is making the choice of whether the child is mentally ill or not? If a parent is fully informed, really, really fully informed about what's really going on with their child, would they agree to allow the labelling process and the consequent drugging to occur?
Brian, can I just stop you for 1 minute?
Of course.
There's a lot of people that are not aware of clinical social workers. Can you tell them what clinical social workers are? Because it's the same subject you're talking about, but people are not aware.
Clinical social workers, I'm not fully familiar with what they are. I deal more with the medical side of things.
Yeah, but clinical social workers, I didn't realise this till one day. The social workers are doing it. And I thought,
they're making the judgment.
No, clinical social workers are teaching education to the kids.
Right.
So, you check it out with what you're saying about the other side.
Well, I got some more to come, because I'm going to allude to that. So thanks, Maggie. No, okay.
It's very important now.
Yeah. Now the parents, you as parents are recipients of loads of information. There's loads of it out there. Actually, I just saw a lady with a hand up. I'm just going to...
I'm trying to get my head around what point you're trying to make.
Yeah.
Because it sounds to me like you're trying to say that things like ADHD, autism, etc. don't exist.
No.
That's what it sounds like.
Okay.
Because I have 3 ASD kids.
Right.
So...
Yep.
But it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. The scientist who made up that word on the deathbed last year, he said, oh, it was just a name I made up. There's no such thing as ADHD. Only because you've been told that by the bloody doctors.
I've got 8 children. Only the 3 youngest have autistic problems. Okay? You can tell the difference between normal and not. That's how I found out that my younger 3 are ASD.
A lot of kids can have a problem because of the chemicals in the environment, the chemicals that's grown with the food. Yes, sorry, Brian. I get so wound up.
I understand.
I should disappear.
The information, the misinformation, it's a minefield out there for any parent trying to make a fully informed decision about the best way to move forward for their children. Now, from a human rights perspective, there's all sorts of things. There's the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, there's the Human Rights Act 1998, as well as the articles laid out in the Convention of the Rights of the Child, which Sue Reed mentioned. But there's a fundamental conflict when considering the rights of both the parent and the child before, during, and after a diagnosis of whether it be ADHD or any other diagnosis has been made. Now, Article 24 of the Convention on the Rights of the Child says, states parties recognise the right of a child to the enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of health and to facilitate for the treatment of illness and rehabilitation of health. Now, there's no denying that children and adolescents experience problems. I don't deny that. It's obvious. But now, those particular problems do prevent them from achieving their goals. They go hand in hand. Here's the deal. A lot of those things go hand in hand with the specific social circumstances that each child may confront in his or her life. It did with me, so I guess it does with other people. But it doesn't mean that they're mentally ill. You know, when you actually take a look at it. And this is what I'm trying to ask parents to do, is to be fully informed. Now, reading Article 24, you have to question this point about highest attainable standard of health for children and adolescents when considering the treatments that are put out there in order to assist them. Now, for ADHD children, the treatments primarily revolve around prescription drugs that are prescribed, and they're known as stimulants. There are other drugs, but stimulants are the well-known and commonly prescribed ones. Now, according to NHS figures, in England in 2013, just under 1.1 million prescriptions for ADHD drugs were prescribed, and that cost the taxpayer £53.3 million. Take the last 10 years, in fact, not the last 10, the last 13, from the year 2000. If you count up all the prescription items for ADHD, there were over 9 million of them, and they were at a cost of £416 million to the taxpayer. That's a lot of money. And then there are the effects of the drugs that are being prescribed. You may not know this, and hopefully, you know, I can give you something you can take away with you. There are internationally 16 drug regulatory warnings, 16, covering the side effects associated with ADHD drugs. Those side effects include, get this, mania, psychosis, agitation, anxiety, hostility, suicidal risk, suicide attempts, suicide, suicidal ideation, suicidal behaviour, depression, heart problems, and sudden death.
In the pharmaceutical companies pushing these medications, food and GP, just to normalise mental health in society.
Rather than answer that here, can I speak with you afterwards? Is that okay? Good question, though.
Thank you. So, can I just ask a quick one?
Sure.
Do you imply that there's a eugenics agenda going on that has been implemented?
No. Let me come to it. No. Let me finish, if I may. Yeah? Now, the drugs are being given in an attempt to remedy what has become known as a chemical imbalance of the brain. Have you heard of that? Okay. Now, under the guise of science, we're told that children and adolescents have this so-called chemical imbalance, and that the use of drugs is to resolve that. That's the premise upon which they're prescribed. But there are no tests to confirm the existence of a chemical imbalance. You cannot test for it. If anyone has ever been told, you'd agree. Okay, you cannot test for a chemical imbalance of the brain, but you're told you've got one, or you're told that your child has one. Now, if you can't confirm the existence, or can't confirm or detect a chemical imbalance, how do you know when you've got a balance as a result of using the drugs? Does that make sense? See what I mean? It's like if you're going to say you've got an imbalance, therefore there must be a point at which you're going to get a balance. Well, you can't.
Bullshit.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But this idea of the chemical imbalance is one of the main factors in actually getting the medication of children occurring. Now, that idea has never been scientifically proven. It just simply has not been proven, yet it's still going on. And those figures I told you about the amount of money being spent on stimulants to resolve the chemical imbalance still goes on. Now, you as the parents, there's literature that's made available to you, just as there probably would have been to the lady who spoke earlier. It leads you to the conclusion that such a chemical imbalance really does exist. It must do, because that's what you're told by the experts. Now, to demonstrate the quality of the information that you're given, I've got some. And here's the first one. Here's a cute book, okay? It's for 6 to 12-year-olds, and it's called Everything a Child Needs to Know About ADHD. Now, that point I was making about the chemical imbalance, I just want to read something out in here, one little paragraph. It's all got cute pictures as well, so that it can convince a child that he's mentally ill. What it says, we all have certain chemicals in the brain that help to control our behaviour. A child with ADHD may not have the right balance of these chemicals. So a 6 to 12-year-old has already been told he's got a chemical imbalance. Then we've got, my doctor says I have ADHD. Again, 6 to 12 years old, getting in there early, letting them know that they have ADHD. And this one says, scientists have been working hard to figure out what exactly causes ADHD. We all have certain chemicals in the brain to help us behave well. They also help us to understand the messages coming from our brain correctly. Just remember, this is for 6 to 12-year-olds, okay? Children with ADHD tend to have low levels of these chemicals in their brains. Okay? There's another one telling you. So that's for the kids.
Is that emotional and mental abuse?
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
Good point. And then you've got the one for parents. We step up this is a guide for parents, a guide to ADHD for parents and families. Okay, and the parent is told there is a chemical imbalance with certain natural chemicals in the front part of the brain of children with ADHD being reduced. Okay, no tests, no science, but you're being told by experts that that's the case.
Oh, bullshit.
Now this is the point where I refer back to where I started, and the redefinition and reclassification of certain behaviours. Some of the criteria used to diagnose kids with this disorder, and get this, honestly, I mean, I'm going to ask you as parents to just go, yeah, nod if this is real to you. A child who, quote, often avoids, dislikes, or is reluctant to engage in tasks that require sustained mental effort, such as schoolwork or homework. Okay. It usually raises a giggle because of the stupidity of it. Yeah, okay, we've all met that. I know that's going on. Have you witnessed often forgetful in daily activities? Okay. Often fails to give close attention to details or makes careless mistakes in schoolwork, work, or other activities. I mean, they do go on. Often has difficulty sustaining attention in tasks or play activities. Often does not follow through on instructions and fails to finish schoolwork, chores, or duties. It goes on. It goes on and on. Now that's the inattentive child, the child who doesn't have attention. What about the active child? And here again we've got the redefinition, and that's what I want to get across to you, how things have been redefined. Children and adolescents can easily, really easily fall into these categories. Often fidgets with hands or feet or squirms in seat. If you've never read the diagnostic criteria, that's one of them. It also often runs about or climbs excessively in situations in which it is inappropriate. Okay, welcome to planet Earth, you know, we've seen that. Often talks excessively. Often on the go. Okay, these are normal behaviours, but they've been redefined as a symptom of a mental illness. So what's the answer? You know, I can stand here and say how, you know, that's wrong, but what is the answer? Any doctors in the house? No? Okay.
Thank God.
All right. Now, it's a matter of sound medical fact that undiagnosed physical illness or injury can trigger emotional difficulties. Several studies show that those diagnosed with a mental illness were actually suffering from a physical condition. Now, the true resolution of many mental illnesses, that begins with a thorough physical examination by a medical doctor. Not whether your child is often on the go, not whether the child talks excessively. Get a physical examination of that child to find out if there's anything physically wrong. I had one quick anecdote. A mum whose child was, you know, climbing the walls. She was having great difficulty with her daughter. What they did was they went to an allergy specialist, and the child was found to have an allergy to your regular supermarket milk. Something was in it. The remedy was not a stimulant drug because the child had ADHD. The remedy was goat's milk. Simple. And then miraculously, ADHD disappeared. So there's a physical condition that may be underlying that diagnosis. Chemicals. Now there's a psychiatrist. Even psychiatrists talk about this, right? It's not just me. I'm the messenger in some respects. There was a psychiatrist called Dr. Sidney Walker. He recorded a variety of reasons why hyperactive behaviour may occur. He said, children with early-stage brain tumours can develop symptoms of hyperactivity or poor attention. So can lead or pesticide-poisoned children. So can children with early-onset diabetes, heart disease, worms, viral or bacterial infections, malnutrition, head injuries, genetic disorders, allergies, mercury or manganese exposure, petit mal seizures, and hundreds, yes, hundreds of other minor, major, or even life-threatening medical problems. Yet, this is coming from a psychiatrist, remember, yet all these children are labelled hyperactive or ADHD. He also noted that some children were simply smart. You get smart kids.
Yes.
They're hyper not because their brain doesn't work in the correct fashion, but because they spend most of the day waiting for slower students to catch up with them. Okay. Those students are bored to tears, and people who are bored fidget, wiggle, scratch, stretch, and, especially if they are boys, start looking for ways to get into trouble. Unquote. And then there's the child with familial problems, who may be being bullied at school, who's perhaps lost a pet, who's had an upset with a friend. There's a host of life events that could result in altered, non-optimum behaviour.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. But all too often, I'm nearly there, but all too often these come under the spotlight, these life events come under the spotlight of mental health. In reality, all that these children are dealing with is a life event. It's a life event. It's not a mental illness.
And the same for adults as well, not just children.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Yeah. I was... Not getting that. Right. Thank you. Yeah. I was talking to a nutritionist a few years ago about this particular subject, and she said to me, this is a nutritionist talking to me, and she said that while children could be deficient in vitamin C, vitamin B1, or even B12, they were never deficient in Ritalin or Concerta. So why are you putting it in? Now, just to get you an overview of this, psychotropic drugs, I'll get with you. Psychotropic drugs produce nullifying effects, which are then hailed as just demonstrably effective. You can give me something and say, well, look, you know, he's better now because he's quiet and he's compliant. But all I would be doing is I would be showing you that I've just been drugged.
I was put on Valium for the next 3 days I was in a coma.
There you go. But did they call it demonstrably effective?
Yes.
There you go.
Yeah. I was climbing walls, they put me on the Valium, I was literally out of the gas. I was not responding.
Right. The point being is that, and I come back to this, see, children and adolescents are not experimental animals. They're human beings who deserve every right to expect protection, care, love, and the chance to reach their full potential, free from the chemical straitjackets and the labels. So, in summary, what I want to get across to you is that your parents, you may well not have your children now, but for those who have, be fully informed. You can go to a doctor, you can speak to the white coat, you can be told this is what's really wrong with your child because he's got hyperactivity, or because, you know, he's got a problem with his spelling or his writing, and here's the remedy. Be fully informed. Is that true? You have to find out for yourself, and I can only impart to you to avail yourself of all the possible information that's available. There is a lot of information out there, but it's worth getting and knowing it all, because after all, and I think you'll agree with me, every child is worth it. Yes. Thank you very much. I see some hands up. I've got 10 minutes.
Yeah, just a quick point
sure.
On what you said about parents involving themselves. I'd like to put it across to you that there are a lot of parents that are vulnerable themselves, and when they go up to the doctors or when they go up to the authorities, they take their word for gospel. So really, we hear you, but there are a lot of people out there who are struggling because they are misinformed and they're not necessarily in the capacity to actually find out.
Totally agree with you. It's tough. And that's why it's, you know, it's like we've got the World Wide Web, and I know that it's full of it. But it's just finding out as much as you can to make it so that it can be both sides of the story. No. I understand.
It can also be extremely dangerous for parents to challenge professionals, particularly medical professionals. And a number of parents who have lost their children have done so because they've done just that. So be warned and be very wary, tread very carefully when you challenge professionals.
That's a very good point. And also, it's the point of testing. if somebody is going to, if there is a test for it, ask to see the test results. Because if you want to see a test result, that's the definitive. Yeah.
Is risperidone on your list of 16?
It's certainly a psychotropic drug. It's an antipsychotic
My
drug.
daughter was put on it because she was suicidal and she actually ended up ODing on risperidone.
Right. It's on our list. We should talk some more. I'd like to, if that's okay with you. Okay.
Retired school teacher of 28 years, comprehensive. I know how the children are being dumbed down. I said, yeah, well, say that. I'm a retired school teacher of 28 years, comprehensive. I know what the state system's doing to dumb the children down. I know what's happening with the Rockefeller created allopathic medical industry, which is linked in with eugenics, Gender 21. I've got DVDs out there on a lot of this stuff. I plotted to take my own life age 11. I never told a soul. I inherited, and I'm glad Belinda's gone because I've told this story 7 times, mercury poisoning from my grandmother. I'm 70 this year, honestly. Because she paid for the new dentistry, which came in 1834, put neurotoxic poison in people's bodies, interest in their brain. It's toxic waste when it comes out, but it's all right in you. It's not, and it passes the placental barrier. Now, children are born toxic. This is child abuse. Now, it affects, so what we need are big detox centres and spas and diet advice. Detox, heavy metal poisoning. The chemtrails, and I go like this because they crisscross, are actually raining aluminium down. Now, I think it's stopped now, but people have aluminium in their bodies, suicidal tendencies. So detox and really help the children, because look on the internet. All right, because look, I was very poorly. All allergies, eczema, asthma, allergies, classic heavy metal poisoning. And obviously it affects the mind, but look what you can do and get rid of it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I now have the pleasure to introduce the next speaker. This is Sonya Poulton.
I would just like to say thank you very much for having me here. I'm going to make this as quick as humanly possible so you can actually go off to lunch. I'm a journalist and broadcaster, and when my daughter, who's at the back there, was about 3 years old, I suddenly realised, she's 16 now, I suddenly realised that there was something very wrong in our world towards the way we're looking at children. And that worried me. I didn't like the way that we appeared to be sexualising children from a very young age. And so I started saying to my editors, there's something really not okay here. We're dressing up dolls as if they look like hookers. And I'm not prepared to put that to my child. I've tried to raise my child in an environment where she could use her own intelligence. And thankfully she was never attracted to those kind of dolls, the sort of brat dolls that had chainmail and stockings and looked really odd. And I later discovered that they were designed by a man who used to look out of his window and watch the school children walking by, and he got inspired to design the Bratz dolls. That was sort of the beginning of my journey, and I realised that something was indeed very, very wrong. And I started to look further and deeper into it and wonder what was it that was taking place that we seem to have an unhealthy attitude towards young children, whereby we wanted to speed up their childhood, in fact not give them a childhood at all. Anyway, to cut a very long story short, my education was basically complete about 2 years ago, following the entire, well not entire, but following some of the revelations about Jimmy Savile. That was when I started to go deeper down the rabbit hole. And I started to talk to parents, some of them here, whose children were stolen by the state. Now, this is not a conspiracy theory. This is a conspiracy fact.
Yeah.
It is taking place. It is a modern-day scandal. And I realised very quickly that there are very few people in the media who are prepared to do anything about it. Part of the reason is that we are dealing with an entire system that is a business which is against parents and children. Now, this ranges from the social workers. Don't get me wrong, I understand that it's a very difficult job being a social worker, I understand that. But after Baby P, which many people would argue, that poor child was allowed to happen in order for measures to be put into force, and I would tend to agree with that. Now again, that sounds like some kind of conspiracy, but you try being a parent of a child where you know that your children are being wrongly taken. So I started to look deeper and deeper into this. Why are so many children being taken? Are these parents really bad? Because of course, parents are always portrayed as remiss when children are taken, because heaven forbid that the state is at fault, or indeed any of the people who are part of that process of the state. And I started to get to know these parents whose children were being taken. And I'll admit, like many people, I started off with are they bad parents? Because you do. Because that's what we're told. We're told that if children are taken, then the parents must be bad. I started to find out stupid things, like children were being taken if parents had mild learning difficulties, or if parents had raised their voice in public and neighbours had reported them. Really ridiculous things. Now, as a parent, I have more than raised my voice. I'm known for having quite a fiery temper, and frankly, I don't give a shit. Because I'm angry. I'm actually angry about what's taking place. It seems entirely wrong to me that there is a business which is involved in not only trafficking our children and ripping them from the arms of parents, but also abusing our children. Now let me talk to you about what happens when you become a whistleblower of these things. There are some very good people, as you all know, in organisations. Not everybody's bad. I'm a mainstream media journalist, okay? And I know that there's a lot of awful journalists, but I consider myself a decent journalist. Bit biased, of course, naturally. But what happens with whistleblowers? And I'll give you one perfect example. Has anybody heard of Brian Peed? Yes. Brian Peed is a perfect example. He worked with young people in childcare services in Lambeth. He wrote a book about it. Brian became very aware of the grooming process within Lambeth Council. He wrote a book about it. When he actually compiled his report on a Friday, by the time he got to his desk on Monday, they had cleared out his entire office, including taking his computers, where all this information was. Where's Brian at this moment in time? Why, he's in jail. And why is he in jail? For some absolute cock and bull charge. They said he was trying to impersonate a barrister. You see, the whole point about the system is it rallies together to shut people up. Brian's not alone, there are others. Robert Green, who has been campaigning for many years for justice for Holly Gregg. Now, I don't know the whys and wherefores, just get me a little cloth, the whys and wherefores about Holly Gregg, but what I do know is that people have not been interviewed about Holly Gregg, and all Robert Green has ever asked for is for people to be interviewed. And Robert Green was arrested on February the 13th. He was held in prison for 5 weeks without even a charge, because this is what they do. And I say they because it really is a case of them and us. I believe you are either part of the solution or you are most definitely the problem. And there are too many people who take the filthy shilling in order to keep their jobs. They keep quiet, they turn a blind eye. People like Robert Green, what is Yvonne doing behind my back? People like, I don't mind, I'm more than happy. I am more than happy. People like Robert Green, people like Brian Peed, they speak up, and unfortunately they have to face the consequences. We need to start speaking up en masse. I'm not talking about just the parents who are suffering this. I'm not talking about the grandparents. I'm not talking about just the carers. I'm talking about people who are not affected by this, but become aware of it, and they say, this is wrong. Because as soon as one person stands up and says it's wrong, it encourages other people to stand up and say this is wrong. Now, what else have I been told along the way? Well, I'm in no doubt whatsoever that forced adoption takes place. I'm in no doubt whatsoever that child stealing by the state takes place. I'm in no doubt whatsoever that where we should be investing the money of us should be in keeping families together rather than tearing them apart. It is a business that benefits the few and distresses the many, and it's not acceptable. No way, no how. There are other cases, of course. There is Cornell at the back there, suffered greatly. Absolutely awful situation. Cornell and his wife, wonderful people. Children taken away. Paul and Asher Roberts, children taken away. I'm sure many of you have seen the video on the internet of Paul and Asher Roberts when their last child was taken away, and I thought the brutality of the agencies involved was absolutely disgraceful. Yes? Refused a naming ceremony. Well, yeah, but clearly disgusting. I could never ever agree with that. I mean, it doesn't make none of it makes any sense to me, except when you start to understand where it's all leading to, and that's the important thing. Because I was like, okay, I don't understand this. These children are being taken away, these families are left broken and beaten down by the system, but why? And then you start to look really into places that are not very nice. Let's be honest, this country, this world has a paedophile epidemic. It's a fact. We don't like it. We don't like it. But even more than that, a lot of the people who gravitate to working with children, they are paedophiles, or they are paedophile enablers, or they are paedophile sympathisers. There is a trafficking which takes place, and these children, there is a direct route from the care home system into abusing children. I don't care what anybody says, the evidence just stacks up constantly. I did some random research for the Sunday Express. I rang around 20 councils. And I picked these out literally out of a book. I didn't target councils, I picked them out. I rang around 20 councils. I wanted to find out how many of these councils knew how many children were missing in care on a monthly basis. Just give me an idea of how many councils do you think were able to give me accurate, up-to-date figures out of 20 councils? Well, actually 4. But, so that's 16 councils who couldn't tell me where the hell their children were. Something is seriously wrong. We know there are approximately 100,000 children go missing each year. We know that 30,000 children never return. Where are all our children?
Could any of them tell you that none of them are missing?
No, not one. Not one. Good question. Not one.
Did you ask Thurrock at all?
I didn't ask Thurrock, no, but clearly I need to look at Thurrock. So then again, I started to look deeper. I started to talk to government ministers. I started to talk to service agents, to Secret Service, all manner of people. What do you know about child stealing by the state? I talked to Andrea Davison, who's now on the run in South America. She blew the whistle on Tony Blair's arms to Iraq scandal. Well, Tony Blair is a man with many secrets, I should say, including, and I don't care who knows what I'm saying, including slapping notices on media not to talk as soon as investigations start to get too close to parliamentary aides and people in Parliament and people in the Lords, okay? That is a man who should not only be held on war crimes, but crimes against families and children, as far as I'm concerned. And one day he will be held to account. So Andrea Davison told me very clearly. What doesn't?
MPs' children do
and a very good reason. And a very good reason. Because they can afford the legal backup to stop it. There is a demographic to children being taken. It is working class and lower working class. And I come from a very lower working class background, so I do know what I'm talking about here.
That's not true anymore. I don't think that's true anymore, you know.
Why? Give me an example.
My partner pays very, very high tax levels.
Right.
You know, and my child was taken a year ago. We're still fighting to get him back.
But is that your child's father?
He's not, but he's been trying to take full parental responsibility.
Okay.
He's been asking to adopt him. You know, he's put forward the care plan to look after him, to work from home. The judge said if he didn't work at all, that would be fine.
Fine.
But working is not allowed.
Right.
Basically, he works in the City of London, he works for an investment bank, he is able to work from home. The judge said, no, it's not
Okay,
acceptable.
I mean, because there are other people. I know about a former consular whose child was taken as well, but it's a minority. It is a minority.
I was a police officer.
Right, but it's a minority. It is a minority. Because the truth is, you're not going to see MPs' children taken because apart from anything else, they can afford to fight the system. Okay? Oh, sorry. What did you say?
Is it social?
Go on. Yes.
Lucy Allen's child is threatened to take her child, and she's Conservative councillors stand in helping her.
But I wonder, because what I've come to understand is if you come up against the system in any way, then they'll turn on you. So I wonder whether she probably wasn't feeding into part of the system. If you're part of the system, it's highly unlikely that they will turn. I said about Brian Peed, he was in a great position, but the moment they turned on the system, they turned on him. And that is the problem. Yes?
Successfully getting a child with her.
Right. Right.
We've spoken a lot about children being taken from their parents.
Yeah.
Not only are they being taken from their parents, they're being taken from their extended family.
They are indeed. They are indeed. You're absolutely right. So what we... There's loads of cleansing taking place. We're all part of a great big social engineering experiment at the moment.
Can I make another comment, which I think is quite important? When the children are taken into care, very often a social worker that's given that child to look after, that child is sent 50 miles away.
Yes,
the
absolutely.
moment that child is removed from the borough in which the parents live, that social worker no longer has any contact with that child or connection. So they don't even know what is happening to the
That's
children.
a very valid point about how children are moved, a distance away from their home, away from the initial social worker who took it. Let me come to you in 2 seconds, okay? Because I know that everybody needs to go to lunch and everything. No, it is technically illegal, but there are many people who are complicit in this. Now, as a member of the media, I know this for a fact, okay? I've recently started doorstepping MPs. I want to know answers because I am very aware that you only get to do interviews with MPs if you ask them a pre-scripted series of questions. Well, sod that, okay? Because as far as I'm concerned, they work for me and I want answers from them. So I have been doorstepping them with my photographer partner. And one situation we encountered was Jack Straw. Jack Straw has had his fingers in many iffy pies, including children, and we encountered him outside Parliament and we ran after him and I wanted to ask him some questions and I was blocked by David Wooding, who works for The Sun, and David Wooding was extremely aggressive and did everything he could to stop me asking Jack Straw questions because they go back a long way. They are no doubt shoveling things backwards and forwards to each other because that's what MPs and journalists do and have done for a long time. Don't think it's over, it's still going on, that is a fact. And there were a number of other things. I was asked to be a regular paper reviewer on the Stephen Nolan show on Radio 5 Live. I went on, I had the mother of all clashes with Edwina Currie, who is nothing short of a piece of filth as far as I'm concerned. Okay? Edwina Currie needs pulling in. I reported her to all the operations, Operation U-Tree, Operation Palliel, and what's the third one?
Operation R?
No, somebody else said, yes, Fernbridge, that's it, Fernbridge, because Edwina Currie knows stuff. And I challenged her on Radio 5 Live and I got shut down. Stephen Nolan said, we won't be discussing paedophiles on here. And even though they had told me I was going to be a regular paper reviewer, they never asked me back. There's a shock. And I still don't give a shit. Because the point still remains that I have to face my daughter at the end of the day and I have to have a clear conscience about what I'm doing as a journalist and as a human being. And it isn't for me to turn my back when I see that things are clearly wrong. Now, when I started writing in depth about paedophiles, I suddenly became the target of trolls. online trolls. Now, these are not ordinary trolls, okay? These are people who set up websites. They claim I've done all manner of awful things. Well, you know what? I have clean hands. Anybody can investigate me. I spent the last 10 years writing in national newspapers about all the things that I had screwed up on in my life because I felt appalling. I felt there was going to come a stage in my life when I was going to need to stand up and be counted, and in order to do that I needed to have clean hands. So I talked about all manner of things, drug use, promiscuity, you name it. I'm not ashamed of my past, not at all, but I knew I needed to write it out there at my hands, because the problem is as soon as you start standing up to the system, they come after you. And I knew that I needed to be really clean, and I am clean. And all these websites started springing up all of a sudden saying that I was a paedophile and I was harbouring paedophiles and involved in, you know, satanic abuse, terrible things. There's memes online which say terrible things about me. But when we started to track down these trolls, we realised something. And what they don't realise yet, and I do hope that this video is going out, because what they don't realise yet is we now have the name and address of 3 of the worst trolls. Okay, and I believe every one of them are either paedophiles or paedophile sympathisers. And let me see how they feel when me and my camera crew rock up on their doors.
Yeah!
We will. And that's coming. And I've already promised that. I put that on Facebook, I put it on Twitter. But what they don't know is we've got their details. And they are bad people, and they go after very vulnerable people, and there's incredibly vulnerable people online. Online is where the parents and the grandparents and the carers have turned to get some kind of justice. And these damn awful paedophile trolls, they go after them, they target them. All right, Sid, I see you over there. God bless you, Sid. That is a man who's walked the breadth and length of this country for children. Lovely, Sid. Lovely, Sid. Right, what else do I have to say then? So basically,
I've said it all.
it is important for me. I'm not here to tell you lot how to suck eggs. That probably every person in this room knows more than I do about child stealing by the state, but all I can tell you is what my pledge is. My pledge is that I will continue fighting, and the reason I will continue fighting is because the alternative is to allow this to continue, allow our children to be stolen from loving parents. So what? None of us are ideal or perfect parents. I'm nearly done, Maggie.
No, it's not often anybody can butt in when she's talking. But I just want to say, this woman is going to be the voice, as a journalist, for all the people and virus.
But I'm a voice, and I like to shout loud because that's what I was raised to do. I was raised that whenever there was an injustice, I needed to highlight it and I needed to shout about it, and that's what my mum told me. And yeah, brilliant mum, brilliant mum.
You're the only journalist for that, so not for that means, not for a fact.
Brian Clare, this is a man who helped me so immeasurably at the beginning of my journey. The most awful details about what had happened to you, Bri, and I thank you so much for that. And through that we were able to bring in ITN, which you know that interview will run soon. You know that, don't you? And you know why. Okay, so basically all I want to say is don't give up, never give up. You are winning. We can't do anything, unfortunately, about the children that have historically been taken, other than to highlight the fact that so much of it was wrong. But don't give up, keep shouting, because the truth is you are being heard. Thank you.
That's Sonya Poulton.
That's from all of us.
Thank you, have a good conference, everybody.
Call it old age, I forgot to tell you all. It's lunchtime. So I'll see you after lunch. And don't forget we've got Michael Bailey, the barrister, Dr. Dennehy, child psychiatrist,
Okay. Yeah, the broadcast will resume at 2:30. So please tell everyone, please someone get this onto YouTube. Thank you for watching. You are at Children Screaming to be Heard. Sorry I've not been able to give much commentary so far. Just doing a very large meeting, standing room only here.
You gonna go to the shop?
Right. Goodbye for now.